Since the dawn of humanity, we have been captivated by the notion of hell. A realm of eternal torment, a place where the soul is tested and punished for its transgressions. From ancient mythologies to modern literature, hell has been depicted in countless forms, each a reflection of our deepest fears and our complex relationship with sin, suffering, and redemption. This compilation brings together a diverse collection of hell stories that span genres and cultures. From the endless cycles of reincarnation in Eastern hells to the chilling labyrinths of the Greek underworld, these tales are as varied as the cultures that spawned them, yet they all share a central theme: the encounter with darkness, punishment, and the unknown. But hell is more than just a place. It is a mirror of the human soul. These stories reflect our anxieties about morality, guilt, and the consequences of our actions. They confront the question of what happens when the boundaries between life and death fade away, and when the sins of the past cannot be outrun. Each tale here offers a unique perspective on suffering, from the terrifying to the sublime, the fantastical to the eerily realistic. As you venture through these narratives, you will meet lost souls, enduring spirits, and figures who struggle with their fate, sometimes defiantly, sometimes resigned. You will be pulled into settings both grotesque and surreal, where the rules of reality twist and break. And perhaps, most importantly, you will encounter the timeless question: can hell ever be escaped? Or does the very nature of its existence lie in the eternal pursuit of redemption or damnation? So, enter if you dare, and listen to the whispers from the abyss. In these stories, hell is not merely a destination, it is a journey, one that will test your courage, your beliefs, and your imagination. The fires may burn, the shadows may whisper, but one truth remains: hell is never as simple as we think. I woke up in a birthing sack, panicked and choking on amniotic fluid. I clawed at the fleshy walls, fighting with all my terrified strength to free myself. With a wet, ripping sound, I was dumped onto the muddy cobbles of the street below, twisting my ankle as I landed. Cold rain blasted my naked body clean of the sack's liquid. I tried and failed to get to my feet. The street was alien to me, an insane medley of architecture ranging from the modern to the prehistoric. The sky above, oiled with storm clouds, illuminating my surroundings with non-stop flashes of lightning. A man walked over to me. His hair was matted with filth, and the rain streaked down his mismatched leather clothes. He said nothing, just watched me squirm on the floor.
Please, help me,
he answered by slamming a foot down on my face, breaking my jaw and making my vision real. He moved onto my limbs, stamping and tugging until he heard the bones snap. Crippled, naked and screaming, there was nothing I could do to defend myself when he started to eat me alive. My introduction to hell wasn't unusual. Very few people survive their first hour, let alone their first night. When they die, they go through the same thing again, emerging from a new birthing sack in another part of the city. Eventually, they learn to attack the first person they see, and if they're lucky, they'll be able to kill that person. That's the one rule of hell. The strong take from the weak. Get used to the idea, and you might just make it through the afterlife. I'm going to give you a helping hand. Consider this your handbook to hell, a primer on the Inferno. Make no mistake though, I'm not doing this out of the goodness of my heart. When you die, you'll owe me one. Don't worry about trying to find me. I guarantee we'll run into each other eventually. Eternity is a long fucking time, so it's a matter of when rather than if. Do as I tell you, and you'll have a better chance than most of avoiding my own nasty introduction to the pit. Welcome to hell. Some people swear they saw a light at the end of the tunnel when they died. To my mind, those people either hallucinated or they're lying. Most of us just wake up in a birthing sack a few minutes after death. The buildings of hell are covered in things, horrible, yellow-brown pimples growing out of brick. I've already mentioned that the first thing you need to do is claw your way out and get ready to fight. This is where the real bitch of a situation comes into play, since not everybody has the strength to break through their sack's flesh. You get the body you had just before you died, see? So, let's say you were born a cripple, or maybe you died too young or too old. Tough shit. You're going to have a rough eternity drowning in birthing fluid over and over. If you manage to break free of your sack, don't waste time moping around, wondering what the fuck happened. Get on your feet and get ready to defend yourself. Chances are good that the first person who sees you will be hungry. There are no plants or animals in hell, so cannibalism is your only option if you don't fancy starving to death and having to start over. Aim to kill the first person you see. It might take a few tries. Most of hell's residents have been fighting for survival a lot longer than you. They might have armor made from tanned skin, scavenged metal and bone. They'll almost certainly have a shiv, club, or axe. All of that will be useful to you if you can take it from them. The next thing to do is find shelter. It never stops raining in hell, and pneumonia is a shitty way to die. Luckily, you'll have a selection of buildings to choose from. Ever wanted to live in a rundown Victorian manor with half a roof and no furniture? How about an ancient Egyptian mud brick hovel? If people have built it, you can find a crumbling version of it in hell. Pick a building, kill any squatters you find, and move in. The best houses are the ones that come with a supply of scrap metal and timber. Not only are these good for making weapons with, they're also vital for getting drinkable water. I learned the hard way that hell's rain is teeming with disease. It has to be boiled before it's safe, so getting a fire going and something to make a bowl with is a necessity. So, we've killed our first person and found a home. Things are going well. Get that far, and you're going to want to hang on to what you have forever. You won't. Something will kill you eventually, and you'll have to start over. My record is a year. If you want to be that, you'll need to understand hell and its denizens. The damned. The people of hell can be grouped into two categories. The first, the fresh meat, are those who just climbed out of their birthing sacks. It's kill or be killed when it comes to fresh meat, always has been. The newly birthed want clothing and tools and will kill to get a hold of them. The second category, the residents, view fresh meat as a quick and easy supply of food, leather, and bone. Residents have an easier time of it for sure, and all of them want to fight to retain their resident status as long as they can. Make no mistake though, residents victimize each other just as much as they prey on the fresh meat. If you're a woman, for instance, well, you better get over any hang-ups you have about rape. Women raped in hell far more than men. It's just a fact. If you're not one of those bodybuilders or warrior woman, do the smart thing and prostitute yourself for protection. Self-respect doesn't keep you breathing. Remember how you get the body you just had before you died? Well, that fact forms from the core of Hell Society. The truth of the matter is that throughout history, it's usually been men who die in battle. That means that in Hell, there are a lot of men with young, strong bodies fit for war. Don't like it? Tough. Those are the guys who call the shots. If you can't fight them, you better do as they tell you. If you live long enough and fight well enough, you might get invited into one of the resident tribes. These are groups of people who band together for the sake of safety in numbers. Believe me, being part of a group makes things a lot easier in Hell. However, keep in mind that you're only part of the tribe for as long as you're a resident. Get yourself killed and it's back to being fresh meat. Tribes offer the closest thing to civilized society you'll find in Hell. If you're a part of a tribe, you have people on your side who probably won't kill you unless shit gets rough. Doesn't sound like much, but that's about as good as it gets. My own survival record was thanks to getting into a tribe. Life was good for a while there. We had about 50 soldiers and plenty of girls to fuck. Nobody could touch us, and the men abided by an honor code, so the usual fear of being stabbed in the back by your friends wasn't too much of an issue. I could have spent my eternity in reasonable comfort, but Hell has ways of fucking over a good thing. Human flesh and boiled rainwater doesn't exactly make for a balanced diet, and sooner or later, even the strongest resident dies of malnutrition. I did well to last a year on it, though the last few months were agony. If I believed in God, I swear he designed Hell in such a way that nobody stays on top of the food chain for long. Next, the city in the wasteland. Most of the damned live in this, the city of Hell. That's where all the fresh meat is born, and considering the size of the place coupled with the short life expectancy, a lot of people will spend eternity without ever setting foot outside of this. Take my advice. Do not leave the city. Things are rough on the streets, that's true, but trust me when I say, it gets a whole lot worse if you try to leave. This is surrounded by a wasteland called Gehenna. At first glance, it doesn't look like much, just an empty expanse of gray stretching out into infinity. Sometimes, the damned lose that fire in the belly, will to survive, and set off wandering into Gehenna. Most of them never come back. I made the walk once myself, a long time ago. I don't care how hard you think you are. Spend enough time in Hell, and it starts to break you down. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm a good person who never deserved this. Nobody can say that and not be a liar. I'm not evil though, or rather, I wasn't. Not until I got to Hell. You murder, rape, and torture because you know they do the same to you. You're murdered, raped, and tortured because they know you'll do the same to them. Give it long enough, and you just don't want to face it anymore. That's when you take the walk into Gehenna. The first couple of miles I walked were nothing special. The rain stopped after a while, the sludge beneath my feet giving way to gray ash, and I caught my first glimpse of Hell's sky beyond the clouds. It was a flat gray with a white sun, completely devoid of beauty or warmth. I trudged on. While walking through Gehenna, I lost any urge to eat, drink, or sleep. My body started to waste away, but I didn't even care. Even when my skin started to peel away and my bones were exposed, I didn't care. The further I walked, the hollower I became in mind, body, and soul. I don't know what would have happened if I kept going. Frankly, I don't want to know. Some part of me still wanted to live, so I turned back. I'd walk for days, maybe weeks, yet when I turned around, this was only a few steps away. I stepped back into the city, and my body finally fell apart. When I emerged from my birthing sack, I swore never to step foot into Gehenna again. Last, escaping from hell. There are ways to leave hell. That should be obvious. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking to you, would I? Sometimes, the living get it into their heads that they want to talk with the dead. They get their crystals, incense, and spirit boards in the hopes of reaching their loved ones. Most do nothing more than trick themselves into thinking they've made contact. They smile and cry, convinced their beloved granny is playing a harp on a cloud somewhere, before getting on with their lives. A few have the skill to actually reach us, though. They can open the gate between hell and the world of the living that we perceive as a pillar of fire stretching down from the clouds. As soon as one of those pillars shows up, the damned scramble to be first to get to it. You haven't seen the true nature of a man until you've watched thousands of the damned swarming over each other, kicking, biting, and clawing to be the one who escapes. Contacting the dead always results in a bloodbath. Even the most civilized tribes fall apart the instant it becomes clear that only one of them can leave. I've left hell twice now. Left my body behind and ridden that pillar of fire up into the clouds. Some people believe that you can be possessed by demons. Let me tell you something. Demons aren't real. What the living see as demonic possession is just one of the damned testing out their new body. Let's face it, if you fought your way through hell to get back to the world of the living, you're not going to be on your best behavior for long. Sooner or later, we take things too far. Our host dies, or their family cave and recruit an exorcist. Then we're fresh out of the birthing sack and on the streets again. I'm going to go now. When you get to hell, remember my advice, and that you owe me one. Maybe we could form a tribe someday. For the time being, though, I want to see what my new body can do. By now, you should have a good idea of what you can expect from hell. You know to kill the first person you see when you fight your way out of a birthing sack. You know to find clothing, tools, and shelter. You know that no matter what you do, how well you do, someday, it's back to being fresh meat. This is the biggest city you can imagine. Tribes fight and die for territory, and taking a wrong turn is a fucking death sentence. You'll get a feel for where you should and shouldn't go eventually. Develop the kind of street smarts you need to stay a resident for more than a day. Even so, there are places in this that you should know about. Let's do a little sightseeing tour of hell. Maybe the advance warning will do you some good. So, Skin Street. Allow me to tell you about the first time I saw Skin Street. I dropped out of my birthing sack onto the road, stood straight back up, and got myself ready to fight. Nobody was there. Not one single person was out on the street that stretched for miles in either direction. I relaxed a little and took a look around. Most of the streets in this are a labyrinthian network of buildings. You spend most of your stay in hell paranoid that, just around the next corner, there's someone ready to beat you down. Skin Street isn't like that. It's a single straight line with only the rain and darkness to hamper visibility. I felt more vulnerable there than I've ever felt in any part of this. You ever walked into a wide, empty space and suddenly felt exposed? Yeah. Imagine also being naked, unarmed, and in hell. Still, I knew what I was supposed to do. The first step was to find some clothing. That's where I learned how Skin Street got its name. Every building, every busted streetlight and gas lamp was decorated with flayed skin. I've been in hell long enough by that point not to be too freaked out by that, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't affect me. In a fucked up kind of way, it reminded me of Christmas. You know, people hanging wreaths and lights from their houses, that sort of thing. I remember the time I spent with my family, with my kids on Christmas morning. Feelings like that get you killed. I pushed them back down and pulled some scraps from the nearest building. If somebody was going to leave clothing material lying about, I may as well take it, right? I didn't know it at the time, but every step I took on Skin Street was being watched. When the attack came, I didn't even get a glimpse of the guy. Bang! My skull fractured from an expert swing of a club. Whoever hit me went for my eyes the second I hit the floor, stuck his fingers right into my socket. I was blind and crying like a baby when he started to peel away my skin. Here's the thing. Some people are fucked up even by hell standards. The loners, serial killers, stalkers, and psychos all make their way to Skin Street in the end. Most of the damn use the whole body of a kill, but the Skin Street people like to take trophies. They leave their ornaments out as bait for the ignorant, skulking in the shadows and waiting for the best moment to ambush. If you find yourself on Skin Street, you're going to have to think fast. Forget clothing, just grab a rock and a piece of wood or anything else you can use as a weapon. Stay out of the shadows. Keep checking behind you and get out of there as quickly as you can. Alright. Now that we got that out of the way. Predition Farms. You're going to be chased in hell. That's unavoidable. At some point, you'll stumble into somebody bigger than you or find yourself outnumbered. Forget about a fair fight. If somebody can take you down without fighting back, you bet that's what they'll do. It's easy to lose focus when you're running for your life. You can forget to pay attention to your surroundings. That, my friend, is a big mistake. The outskirts of Predition Farms are littered with billboards. They promise free food and safety to anybody fucking stupid enough to believe them. The tribes that fight over that particular territory like to herd people off the streets and into industrial complex they call home. The good news is that those tribes won't kill you. The bad news is that they're big fans of taking people alive. They've got a project, you see. Been working on it for as long as I can remember. I couldn't tell you who originally decided that hell should have organized food production, only that the idea stuck and that over the years, countless tribes have taken it upon themselves to try and make that dream a reality. Get yourself captured by them and you can look forward to a bit of slave labor. For the most part, the Predition Farms tribes try to make use of the birthing pods as a source of food. They force their slaves to harvest them from the walls, grind them up in industrial vats, mix them with blood, body parts, rainwater, and anything else that could conceivably make a broth. The life of a slave is short, brutal, and disgusting, particularly when those slaves are then used as guinea pigs for the latest concoction. You see, the amniotic fluid can be drunk if you're desperate, though drinking too much is guaranteed to make you empty your stomach from every available orifice. The flesh of the sacks is a different matter, though. I couldn't tell you exactly what the birthing sacks are. Some people say that they're actual flesh, while others swear they're more like a fungus. What I do know is that they repair themselves over time. Eat some of their flesh, and over the next few days, they'll grow a new birthing sac inside you. It's a small mercy, that you won't live long enough to see it break through your skin. You'll be dead shortly after your stomach burst. If you're lucky, your days as a slave will end when the tribe decides they want some real meat. They're not stupid enough to test their broth themselves, not when there's no shortage of slaves in hell. Look, I can't force you to stay out of Predition Farms. I can only offer advice. In my opinion, if you think you're being herded there, it's better to take whatever's to hand and cut your own throat. I take fresh meat status 100 times before spending another day on the farms. Next, the boneyard. So, maybe you're thinking to yourself, hey, I'm the kind of nutjob who joined a cult. Is there anything like that in hell for me? If that sounds like you, the boneyard has you covered. You see, there's a certain kind of religious fanatic who really does belong in hell. I'm not talking about the old dears who bake cakes to raise money for the new church roof here. I'm talking about the guys who went to war because God commanded it, who burned women supposedly consorting with demons and saw nothing wrong with fucking the odd kid. When those people get to hell, they're too thick-headed to make sense of what happened. Why face reality when you could pretend it's all just a test of faith? They find like-minded folk in the boneyard. I'm told that at one time, the boneyard was a cathedral surrounded by a cemetery that stretched from horizon to horizon. Maybe that's true. I don't know. These days, it's a shanty town of temples and churches built from materials scavenged from the streets. Everywhere you look, you'll find wide-eyed zealots preaching their own twisted version of redemption and gangs of masked men on the prowl for fresh converts. Mortification of the flesh is the main pastime in the boneyard. If you listen to the cacophony of sermons, you'll be informed of how the flesh is wicked and must be purged of sin. How lucky we are to be given such a holy duty. How fortunate to be given the opportunity to redeem ourselves before God. The people of the boneyard have had a long time and plenty of fucking practice when it comes to mastering torture and degradation. I'm not a good person. I've killed, raped, and cannibalized. But I can honestly tell you, I'd never been able to dream up some of the shit that goes on in a boneyard. I wandered in there by accident once, and I've never been able to get what I saw out of my brain. I watched a woman, naked and bound, forced onto her knees and violated with iron rods. A preacher sewed his own eyes and lips shut in front of a crowd before sawing off his manhood with a piece of slate. A boy of maybe 14 was publicly crucified. A girl was drowned in shit. An older man had sharpened flint pushed under his fingernails. And I could list off 100 other atrocities done in the name of redemption. Stay away from the boneyard. The people there decided that hell just isn't hellish enough for their liking. Forget about redemption. Forget about God. The only way out of hell is by riding a pillar of fire and taking over a living body. Focus on that if you want to escape. The damned can't offer you salvation. The damned only offer pain. I have to leave you soon. If I'm to make the most of life on Earth, I'm afraid I'm going to have to skip town. While I've had plenty to keep myself entertained, this body just isn't suitable for a run-in with the police. It's only a matter of time until some nosy neighbor thinks to pick up the phone. With the humidity over the last few days, Mummy and Daddy are already pretty ripe. Here's something you have to understand. Hell is a big place. I've given you fair warning about a few of the locations I myself have run into, and that will have to do. Even if I wrote a library's worth of novels solely dedicated to mapping out the distinct locations within Dis, I still couldn't tell you everything about the city. What I can do is give you a bit of information about some of the damned. The Slaughterman. Take a moment to think about all the celebrities you know. How many of them do you reckon would do well in this? Not many, I'll wager. Perhaps none. Fame and fortune on Earth doesn't count for shit when you're dead. Very few people are strong enough, mean enough, and downright psychotic enough to earn a reputation in hell. Those few who have what it takes are people you never want to meet. The Slaughterman is one of hell's legends. A huge bearded man with foul teeth, bloodshot eyes, and foam on his lips. Rumor has it that the day he first emerged from a birthing sack, he was unlucky enough to land at the feet of a slaver tribe. Well, those tribesmen chuckled to themselves and readied their clubs and whips, only too happy to take some fresh meat captive. Outnumbered 12 to 1, naked, unarmed, and brand new to hell, most people wouldn't stand a chance. If you believe the stories, the Slaughterman shrugged off the clubs battering against him and the whips cutting into his flesh as though they were insect bites. He picked up the first slaver, put his hand into the man's mouth, and pulled his jaw right out of his skull. He moved on to another, then another, tearing them apart with his bare hands until the survivors turned and fled. Nobody knows for sure who he was in life. I've heard theories though. The most popular one being that he was the berserker of Stamford Bridge. Supposedly, a single Viking held up the English army single-handedly. It didn't matter that he could never win, that he was outnumbered, that his enemies had better weapons and armor. He stood on that bridge and he fought. By the time he was brought down, he killed no less than 40 men. I don't know how true any of this is. I've never seen the Slaughterman for myself, and I don't fucking want to. What I can tell you for sure is that people don't become legendary in hell without good reason. I'd guess that the only one who knows the truth is the Slaughterman himself, and he isn't saying anything. Since the day he arrived in hell, he's only spoken once. The fleeing slavers heard it as the Slaughterman tore their tribe apart. Naked, bloody, surrounded by corpses, the Slaughterman looked up to the storm-racked sky and bellowed a single word. Valhalla! Next, Hellhounds. How about a little story? I wasn't new to hell. I made myself some clothes in a wooden club, found shelter, and had a big slab of meat roasting over a campfire. The only thing I didn't have was a tribe. The area I'd been birthed in seemed slummy even for Des. All half-collapsed hovels and mud huts. Iron was scarce, barely enough to make myself a water bowl. All in all, not a good spot for a tribe. My plan was simple enough. I'd have a decent meal, carve myself a shiv or two in case I lost my club, then find somewhere more or less dry to slave. After that, I set out to look for a tribe. Even the mildest tribe initiations result in a few scars and a broken nose, so I wanted to be as well rested as I could be. Sleep in hell is both vital and dangerous. There's a knack to finding somewhere that's simultaneously sheltered, hidden, and with access to an escape route. Even then, you never get more than a few hours at a time. In hell, the slightest suspicious noise should scare the shit out of you. A low, throaty growl definitely counts as a suspicious noise. I leapt out of my impromptu nest of skins and wood, raised my club, and returned to growl with one of my own. A woman had crept into my building and was staring at me with dilated pupils. She looked at me in a bad way, skinny, naked, and covered in weeping sores. Her lips peeled back to reveal broken and jagged teeth. It took me all of a second to size her up. She'd been living rough for days or weeks. Judging from her protruding ribs and bloated stomach, she was well on her way to dying of starvation. So, she was weak, hungry, and didn't have a weapon. "I've already eaten," I said, relaxing a little and giving my club a few practice swings. "No sense in letting you go to waste, though." I took a step towards her and she bolted. Just turned right around and scampered away in a strange animal gait. I took off after her, certain that I could outpace her. Even if there wasn't much meat on her, bones could still be useful. I chased her through a few streets, struggling to keep my footing on the muddy ground. When I finally got close enough to swing my club, she stopped dead. The suddenness of it caught me off guard, and I tripped over her, losing my club as I fell. She howled in triumph, a sound that was echoed by a dozen other throats. That day, I learned two things about the Hellhounds. The people who lose their minds and become little more than beasts after enduring centuries in hell. Firstly, they have the necessary animal cunning to hunt as a pack. Secondly, human teeth and fingernails are perfectly capable of ripping flesh from the bone. The surgeons. Modern doctors really thrive in hell. Academia and reliance on technology doesn't leave you in the best state to endure the endless violence and brutality. There are exceptions, though. The people who learn to sew their friends back together amid the machine gun fire of the Somme. Shamans, witch doctors, and holy men who endured famine and warfare. Survivalists who knew how to cauterize their own wounds in the middle of a forest. Those are some of the people who might just be strong enough to ply their trade to the damned. After all, working knowledge of basic medicine is just one of those things that's beyond a lot of the meatheads roaming this. Most of hell's surgeons find a tribe as soon as they're able. Their tools might be crude, but they soon learn to make dough. Flint, slate, and shards of glass serve as their scalpels. They make thread from human hair and needles from slivers of iron. Whenever a member of the tribe has an infected sore, a surgeon will be the one to drain the pus. A tribal surgeon could well save your life, but they'll do it without anesthetic. Then, there are the freelance surgeons, the people who try to go it alone. They make themselves a uniform, the theory being that the damned will recognize them if they all look alike. It doesn't really work. But then, you can't expect much logic from people who lost count of how many times they've died. For one thing, fashions change over time. I'm told that the freelancers wore headdresses and bone necklaces at one point. The current trend is to mimic Venetian plague doctors by donning a beak mask and wearing a long black coat of fire-blackened skin. Freelancers are rare. Very rare, in fact. You'll see thousands of the damned for every freelancer surgeon you come across. When you do come across one, be fucking careful. Firstly, surgeons don't get a free pass in hell. The damned are more likely to attack a freelancer than they are to barter their tools, clothes, or slaves in exchange for his services. You can't be certain if the man in the bird mask and black coat is really a surgeon, or somebody who murdered a surgeon and took his clothes. Perhaps they made the outfit themselves in order to draw the weak and the wounded close. Advertising doesn't always work as intended in this. If the freelancer turns out to be genuine, that doesn't give you an excuse to drop your guard. Freelance surgeons aren't usually the most stable people. But another way, freelancers are usually sadistic fucking psychopaths. Sure, they might stitch you back together and send you on your way. They might also decide it'd be more interesting if they stitched you to somebody else. They might think paying an arm and a leg for a service should be taken literally. They might turn out to be some wannabe serial killer who's yet to find their way to Skin Street. For each freelancer trying to do a tough job in a tougher place, there are a dozen or so Mengles who want to try out their toys on somebody too injured to fight back. Stick with your tribe surgeon if you're lucky enough to have one. Failing that, learn to patch up your own wounds. Trust me, if you're able to read, you've already got the intellectual advantage over a lot of Hell's residents. Universal education is pretty recent. Freelancers aren't worth the risk. Campions. I'll be honest with you here. I don't know if Campions actually exist. What I'm going to tell you is something that somebody else told me. It's up to you to decide if it's true or not. Personally, I really fucking hope it isn't. People one another in hell. It happens a lot. If you're not strong enough, it'll happen a lot to you. The good news for the ladies out there is that damn man fire blanks. You'll almost never be impregnated. I say almost never, because if you believe the stories, there's an incredibly slim chance that a couple of those little swimmers will be awake and looking for an egg. Just to put this in perspective, we're talking conjoined twins level of unlikeliness here, and that's just conception. The chances of a pregnant woman surviving the full 9 months in hell are probably conjoined triplets level of unlikely. You're talking about a perfect storm of beating the odds here. But this is eternity. A monkey randomly mashing keys on a typewriter will eventually produce the complete works of Shakespeare if it goes at it for an eternity. The result of that perfect storm, of those monkeys with their typewriters, is a Campion. A child conceived, born in hell. I'm not saying they exist, okay? I'm saying I've met somebody who swears it's true and that he's seen the Campion for himself. You see babies in their birthing sacks from time to time. Usually it's just a body. Occasionally you see one drowning. Most of the damn ignore them. They wouldn't survive a day on the streets even if you could afford to devote your full attention to them. Better to leave them be. It's only the really fucked up people who cut through their sacks and... yeah, I'm not going to finish that thought. I'm getting sidetracked. So, this Campion who may or may not have existed apparently looked like a normal child. It cried, it shit, it sucked its mother's tits just like a regular baby would. The mother was part of a tribe, and they'd been able to protect her throughout her pregnancy. Couldn't tell you why. Curiosity, perhaps. When it was born, the whole tribe gathered around to have a look. Among them was the man who told me this story. Somebody eyed me years later and eventually killed. This man cut the baby's cord and lifted it up to his face. Every man in the tribe had raped the mother at one point or another. He wanted to see if the child looked anything like him. The Campion looked like a normal child in every way, but one. Its eyes were dead, lifeless, like a doll's. Sure, the kid was alive. It wriggled and cried like a normal baby. Those eyes were wide open though, not scrunched closed like a newborn's eyes should be. Wide open, empty, doll's eyes. If that story is true, I don't blame the tribe for killing the child. Something like that shouldn't exist. Right, I'm done. I have to go. This is the point where people like to have things nicely tied up. A few dragons slain, a few maidens saved. At the very least, you could expect some kind of moral lesson to think over. I think that, in this case, That sort of thing is missing the point. There are no dragons to slay, no morals to learn. We do not live happily ever after. There's no grand revelation, no clever twists, no purpose, no redemption, no hope. There's only eternity among our kind. Hello. It's been a long time. The last body I had in the living world didn't cope too well with my mind driving it. It's sometimes hard to remember that the lessons you learn in hell aren't a good fit for the civilized world. When murder is just a normal part of existence, you tend to keep doing it out of habit. The inevitable result is either death or exorcism and a trip back to the city of Dis. Safe to say, I got a bit carried away the last time I was here. After my last taste of freedom, I knew I had to get back out of Dis. My existence ever since I squandered my last host has been utterly dedicated to fighting my way back into a pillar of fire. I had to escape Dis. After what I've seen, I had to escape. This new body seems a little more durable than the last one. Now that I'm back, shall we take another trip into hell? The Favon Swamp. It rains in hell. It rains all the fucking time, and that water has to go somewhere. Most of it drains out into the Gehenna, where it sinks into the otherworldly ash and apparently disappears. The rest of it flows either into the sewers beneath the city or it collects in the Favon Swamp. Remember how it's a bad idea to drink the rainwater in hell without boiling it. Well, Favon's water will kill you no matter what you do with it. Even letting the stuff touch your skin can be deadly. You see, the swamp isn't just filled with disease and rot, it's also brimming with chemical waste. One pool might simply be undrinkable, but another might dissolve your flesh. If you're mad enough to travel to Favon, or unlucky enough to be born there, your odds of survival are slim. Favon's waters are inky black, and it's impossible to tell just how deep a pool is by looking. It could be an inch, or it could be a mile. You never know whether or not your next footfall will plunge you into the cloying abyss. Worse still, there are places where the sewers gradually drain the water and create unseen vortices capable of dragging down even the strongest of the damned. To navigate the swamp, you're better off using the crumbled buildings as stepping stones. The corrosive water causes wooden supports to wither and collapse, so there's plenty of debris lying around to stand on. Even so, if you don't take it slow and keep your balance, it's easy to slip and subject yourself to a fucking agonizing death. Last but not least are the wildfires. These are the reason that even the most insane tribes don't try to establish a permanent stronghold in the Favon Swamp. All that chemical waste and decaying matter makes the swamp extremely volatile. A lightning strike or buildup of gases can result in immense explosions that ignite Favon's surface for miles around. Wildfires move fast. I guarantee you that you won't outrun one. Cositas. The first time you see Cositas, you could be forgiven for thinking you reached the very edge of Dis. The pit is dozens of miles wide and several times as deep. At some point in the dim and distant past, a fragile alliance of tribes put their slaves to work digging a quarry. Why they did this is lost to time, but many believe it was an attempt to escape Dis. Perhaps those tribes hoped that if they dug far enough, they'd eventually turn their way out of hell. In my view, the more likely answer is that the tribes were looking for resources. If that's true, then the excavation was a success. Miles below the surface, beneath the rock and dirt, there are caverns filled with veins of iron and copper. So far underground and sheltered from the relentless fucking rain, it's far easier to create a hot fire enough to smell ore. The value of such a position wasn't lost on the tribes, and that alliance soon showed how brittle it was. After a short but savage burst of treachery, the initial settlers of Cositas all but wiped themselves out. Since then, the pit has been settled and mined countless times. Coordinated efforts from various tribes have transformed the quarry into an abyss. So far, these alliances have always been broken sooner or later. Cositas has many paths into its depths, and the lower you go, the more labyrinthine the pit becomes. The sprawling caverns shelter entire shantytowns and crude smelting facilities. Some are abandoned, others have been lost to cave-ins. Yet there are still plenty of tribes who fight, join forces, and betray one another over the precious ore veins. By this point, you have to go pretty fucking deep to find an untapped vein, and this is where Cositas becomes truly deadly. Anybody who thought they might be able to tunnel out of hell would be sorely disappointed once they learn what lies in the depths. In all these years, after digging for so many miles, that one person has run into some magical portal leading out of this. They also haven't run into magma for that matter. Instead, the deeper you go, the colder Cositas becomes. I've never been to the very bottom myself. I'm told that down there, the air is cold enough to freeze your blood and shatter your skin. Maybe that's true. I could certainly believe it. On the rare occasions I've been to Cositas, I've always had to turn back once the walls become more ice than rock and the narrow walkways become a death trap. If you have the numbers to do it, Cositas is still a valuable place to settle. Just remember that when hunger, cold, and greed are your constant companions, none of the damned can be trusted. The Pale Witch. I've told you about the Slaughterman previously, but hell has other legendary figures, each with their own sobriquets. The Ripper, the Grim Doctor, the Tyrant, and many more. So far, I've only encountered one of these figures. During my last day in hell, I came across the Pale Witch. As is always the case with legends, the truth about the Pale Witch tends to get lost amid the superstition. I've heard plenty of theories as to what she is. The Pale Witch is a Striga who has the power of the evil eye. The Pale Witch is a Gorgon whose gaze turns her victims to stone. The Pale Witch is a succubus who entraps the minds of those she wishes to consume. All of that is bullshit. I've seen the Pale Witch, and I know the truth about her. When I first saw her, I didn't realize who I was looking at. She was naked and locked in combat with an armed resident, so I just took her for fresh meat. Here's a tip for you. If you see a resident fighting fresh meat, kill both of them while they're distracted. I planned to do exactly that, but something about the fight seemed off. Residents usually have the upper hand in a fight against fresh meat, and this particular bout definitely seemed about as one-sided as it gets. She was naked, whereas he was clad in leather and bone. She was unarmed, whereas he had a club. She was wayfish, whereas he was huge. Despite him having the advantage, the resident was clearly terrified of her. The rules of hell dictated that he should have cracked her skull, taken her skin, and eaten her flesh. But that just wasn't happening. He was uncoordinated and apparently desperate to escape. Every swing he took was clumsy, and the blows he did manage to land on her didn't seem to have any effect. I could only stare as this naked, vulnerable woman took the resident's club from his unresisting hand and swung it at his knee. I'm accustomed to the sound of bones breaking by now, but this time, the noise caught me off guard. How the fuck was this happening? She brought the club down on his other knee, then his elbows, then his ankles, then his shoulders. She left him broken and screaming on the floor. She could have finished him off with a blow to the head, stolen his clothing, and taken her rightful place as a resident. That's how hell works. Those are the rules I've learned through bloody trial and error. That isn't what happened. Rather than kill him, she sat down beside him in the mud and took his hand in hers. I actually thought she was going to console him until she started breaking his fingers. One by one, she snapped the fingers on both his hands with a calmness that made no sense to me. Torture is common in hell, but there's always a purpose behind it. The people in Skin Street do it out of sadism, and the people in the boneyard do it for their insane purification rituals. The woman did it without emotion and without reason. I honestly don't know if she even understood that she was hurting him. I don't think her mind works the same way as ours. Eventually, the resident lost consciousness. A man can only take so much pain before the shock gets him. Surely now, she'd be satisfied. Surely, she'll take his clothes and restore hell's order. No. She stood up, tilted her head slightly, and uttered a noise for the first time. It wasn't a victory cry, nor was it even a sigh of relief. Instead, the sound she made was nothing more than a faintly bemused. It was as if she couldn't comprehend why her plaything had stopped moving. She stood up and stepped away from him, apparently content to leave him alive, unconscious and crippled on the ground. She kept his club, but didn't take his clothing. The cold and rain didn't seem to bother her. Then, she looked at me. In that instant, I knew I was looking at the pale witch. I looked into her eyes, and I couldn't fucking move. I understood what she was straight away, and the sheer terror of it froze me. The pale witch isn't a striga. She isn't a gorgon, and she isn't a succubus. The pale witch is a Campion. It's hard to put into words exactly how paralyzing the sight of a Campion is. That perfectly serene face and those dead, staring eyes just don't belong on a body that's otherwise human. It was like looking into the face of a mannequin and knowing that it's looking back at you. That noise again. That kind of detached curiosity shouldn't exist in a world of predator and prey. Might makes right. Survival of the fittest. Nobody in the city of Dis has any right to make that noise. She took an awkward step towards me, and I saw that her right leg was broken. It seemed that her fight with the resident had injured her after all. She just didn't notice it. She tried to walk normally, completely unaware that one of her legs had an extra joint. I don't care how tough you are. Nobody should be able to put their full weight onto a broken leg without even wincing. She stepped closer. Her zombie shuffle steadily closing the gap between us as I stared at her. She raised her club, and my survival instincts finally kicked into gear. Her transfixing spell broke just enough for me to stumble backwards and avoid her swing. I ran. I ran from a woman with a broken leg, and I'm not even ashamed of it. Looking back on my experience, there are some things I just can't comprehend. The Pale Witch is a Campion. I'm certain of it. She was born in hell, and hell is all she's ever known. She also looked to be about 30 years old. It just shouldn't be possible. No baby survives long in this. Even if they had a tribe to protect them, there just isn't enough nourishment for an infant to grow into a toddler, let alone an adult. The Pale Witch is a walking impossibility. Her existence is a defiance of all reason. I would endure every torture the people of Skin Street and the Boneyard could conceive of, if it meant I would never have to look into her eyes again. I'm writing this in a hurry. I don't have much time, and any second now, he will find me. I don't even know if this will go through. Let me explain. 3 days ago, at 10:58 p.m. on a cool Wednesday night, my life came to an end. I was a limo driver for an exceptionally douchey client. He treated me like garbage. Eventually, I snapped. In a fit of rage, I crashed a car. It was a blinding flash of light, and then heat. The heat always comes first, and you're blinded. It's only natural, of course. You just aren't used to the lighting, I suppose. Afterwards, your eyes begin to adapt. You start seeing shapes and colors. Then it hits you. Everyone sees the same thing at the same time. A massive gleaming pillar of smooth black stone piercing the sky, an earthy roof stretching to eternity. There are gasps, then tears. Finally, there's collection. When it happened to me, I simply stood shell-shocked. Then the floor crumbled beneath me. I fell into a pitch-black void where a voice spoke to me.
Welcome to hell. Patient 11-75678 53558.
The voice was gravely and deep, malice-filled. What's gonna happen to me? I choked out.
Absolutely nothing. We are bad people. You are bad too. Thus we shall thrive together.
The voice finished. Another flash of light hit me. When I could finally see again, I stood in front of a towering mansion. It had at least 3 floors, with outdoor water features. How did those even work? And painstakingly good detailing. 3 supercars sat in the garage, though I couldn't see the brands. To my left stood a short, red man with horns. I shrieked and jumped back, but he didn't even look at me. Instead, he spoke.
2 people in 1 go. That's impressive. You will sleep here in the morning. You will work grueling labor to make up for your sins. Afterwards, we offer you a choice.
My first night in hell was a restless night. I tossed and turned in an extremely comfy bed. The room was dark, but definitely hot. I toiled for what seemed like hours before sleep hit me. When I woke, I found myself standing, holding a pickaxe and waist deep in a hole. The same red man was standing over me.
You had 300 days of sins to account for. Now, pick up your pickaxe and start mining. I don't care what you mine, just do it.
Then again, he disappeared. I began mining. The rock was smooth and red, and my pickaxe bounced off. Eventually, I found a more effective stance and began to claw my way through. After about an hour of digging, I heard more clanking from my left.
Hey, hello?
I asked, hoping for a response.
Yes. Who are you?
A sharp, tiny voice pierced through the boiling hot day.
I am a patient, same as you. How many days do you have? Oh, me? I'm done. But sticking around here is better.
He said.
What do you mean? Don't you want to go to heaven?
I interrogated.
No, but they gave me the option. Heaven isn't as great as they say. If you knew what goes on up there, you want to stay down here.
He concluded.
What goes on up there?
But the man was gone, leaving me to think for the rest of the day. Eventually, I settled into a rhythm. I would wake up in the mines, give 30 minutes of good work while thinking about my sins, and I would also talk to the stranger. He told me his name was Thomas. Although I prodded him about the topic of heaven, he refused to answer my questions. He said I needed to see for myself or I wouldn't believe it. That's all I needed to hear. A day turned into 2, then 5, then 10, then 50, then 100. At long last, day 300 rolled around. I woke up, but I wasn't standing in the mine. Instead, I stood in front of a huge winged creature, red and scaly, with huge fangs and claws. He extended both hands for a handshake. One hand was marked heaven, the other marked hell. I knew this was it. This was my decision point. I reached a hand out for heaven and shook his hand. It took 10 seconds in heaven for me to regret it. When the light cleared, I was horrified. There were men, women, and children of all ages strung up in unnatural positions. There were limbs scattered about here and there, and the floor was a sea of blood. It wasn't just humans. There were animals too. All of the people had terrified screams still glued on their face. And was that? No, it couldn't be. I could have sworn I saw an eye blink. I walked through the sea of torture until I finally saw something. In the middle of a field of eyes and teeth was a white table, pristine and untouched. A woman was laid on the table, and a man stood over her. A feeling of divinity struck me, and in that moment, I knew without a doubt that I was looking dead at God. The man didn't look anything out of the ordinary. That's the only description I came up with.
Hey,
I shouted,
what is this place?
The man turned around calmly. Something was off. Wind began to blow and chills ran down my spine. I'm God. Are you ready for your divine purpose? Fear filled me. In that moment, I knew that if I stayed, I would end up like the men and women strewn up all around me. I ran as fast as I could. As I ran, I heard cackling. See you soon. A gleeful crow rang around the entire realm. I've been running as fast as I can. Along the way, I found a phone. It somehow had internet. I'm trying to get this out there, and I'm typing while I run. Impressive, I know, but the point still remains. Get the word out. Heaven is a trap. Don't go. Choose hell. I have been wandering for nearly 300 years now. My blistered feet never seem to heal, and every time I stop walking, I'm sucked into the sand and slowly dissolved, before being spat back out to continue walking. There's only one correct path, marked in blood-red sand. It goes up a mountain, across a jagged bed of rocks, and we have to hang ourselves above a pool of water at the end. We pass out, feel the joy of drowning, then resurrect instantly at the same starting point. Any attempt to deviate from the path doesn't work. It's like a magnet will pull us back to the road, and as punishment, we get sucked into the sand. Trust me, it hurts much less to walk. I walk as slowly as I can every day, but it only prolongs the torture to come. Every day, every hour, I walk. I wonder why I've never seen another soul here. How can I be the only one in hell? Some days, I fantasize that I'm actually strapped to a hospital bed, and all this will end once I wake up. But it never does, and I am not that deluded. One day, I was given a chance. I was going up the same mountain I had to go across every day, and this time I saw a tall, dark-haired, rather handsome teenager. He snapped his fingers, and the red sand blended into the background. I stopped in front of him. "Hello, Zartha." He smiled, his teeth gleaming beneath a pair of nightshade violet eyes.
Who are you?"
I gasped. Those white teeth increased as his lips pulled back in an even wider smile. "Take a guess, Zartha."
"You're the devil."
"Bingo!" The teen laughed, an unholy sound in this solemn mountain. "And I am here to tell you that your punishment is almost up. Your time has come to be reborn."
"What?"
No need to look so surprised. I punish bad people. I don't keep them here forever. I was still too suspicious to believe him. He was the devil after all. There had to be a trick.
"What do I have to do?"
He pointed behind me, a dark finger materializing a door from a different dimension. Now I knew why I hadn't seen anyone. We were probably walking through a million different dimensions, each of us oblivious. The realization made me a little less lonely, especially when the man stumbled out from it. "This is Peter Zartha. The two of you will need to work together to get out of hell. After you drowned yourself, follow the red sand all the way." The devil looked at me, and a voice boomed in my head. "Only one of you will make it out of here. The other stays here forever." I gasped, and Peter grabbed me. Apparently he hadn't heard anything, because his face looked more concerned than worried. And so began our arduous trek. We walked past the inner sanctums of the Devil's Playground, wincing with each new revelation. Every step, I was wondering how I would overpower Peter when he was obviously stronger.
"Hey, you alright?"
I looked over at him.
"Yeah. I'm just wondering what it would be like to be reborn again. Why were you here anyway?"
I bit back tears.
"Suicide. I was being bullied in school for sleeping with the most popular girl, who had a boyfriend at the time. They called me scum, egged my car, burned my books. The teachers weren't doing anything either, because one of the teachers was the mother of the boyfriend. I couldn't take it. I jumped from a bridge."
I bit back tears, remembering the terror of falling.
"What about you?"
His face looked sad.
"Murder. I had a daughter who was being bullied too. I saw her cry every night. One day, someone cut her hair off.
A glint appeared in his eyes.
I tracked down the kid, and he pulled out a knife on me. My Marine training kicked in. I took off his arm. He died of blood loss.
He looked at me.
And now we are here, suffering for things we never deserved to go through."
I looked back at him as something changed. It was as though hope grabbed a hold of me, as though it could somehow exist in this hellhole. I smiled and replied,
"Well, at least we're done with our sentence."
We exchanged details of our past lives, and we eventually became friends. The month-long trek seemed easier with him around. We went past fire, freezing waters, and glass showers, until a reddish aura began to appear at the foot of a gigantic mountain. We rejoiced as we reached the end of our journey, looking up at the gate on a rock shelf just out of reach.
"Zartha, give me a leg up. I'll pull you up afterwards."
His smile made me remorseful. Despite our friendship, the devil's words still rang clearly in my head. He murdered. He took someone else's life. I deserve to get out of here more than him. When we are reborn, we wouldn't even remember each other anyway.
Okay.
He went up first, and then pulled me up. We stood as we prepared to walk through the portal, and he turned to me.
"I know we won't remember each other after this, but I wish we could. All my time in hell, and I'm only sorry for that. Yeah, I'm sorry too."
I twisted, prepared for his look of shock as he tumbled to the ground. Instead, he held strong and flung me off the rock, where I hit the red sand with a thumb. I began to sink, but instead of the standard dissolving and recovering, I only felt the pain. I
couldn't even die and resurrect. It was the kind of pain that I envisioned only hell to harbor. Why? I screamed up at Peter. He looked at me and walked through the portal wordlessly. I was left to rot in an endless eternal loop of anguish and pain. Peter stepped out through the portal and sighed. The teenager was at the other end, kicking back on a chair.
How was it, Peter?
He shrugged and turned to face the wall, where the man was still struggling in desperation, watching the gates close forever.
I thought he was different.
The devil laughed.
Different. People are all the same, Peter. They don't know love for others. They only know how to look out for themselves and given the right excuses. Even eternal damnation can be justified. Look at him. Prepared to sacrifice you, the one who made hell bearable for him. You still think people can be saved?
Peter's face betrayed no emotion.
There's a reason this is called hell.
The devil smirked, surveying his guests, unfolding his wings, and picking up a clipboard.
And that's why you don't get many visitors, Saint Peter.
Hello, my name is Max Rene. My story begins at the end, if there is an end. I've been co-signed to the fourth circle of hell. If you've ever read Dante's Inferno, or even if not, you might remember that it punishes greed. Misers and spenders toil on opposite sides of a circle, rolling huge bags of money with their chest until they crash into one another. The sinner that falls to the ground first is the loser, who gets whipped by a demon until they stand back up and try again. The winner receives 1 gold coin, tradable for 1 minute's rest before they face their next opponent. You might not think that there is any rest where we are, but it exists to remind us of what we're missing before our torments begin anew. I don't know how long I've been here. I almost don't care. Time is elastic in this place, stretching as far into the past, present, future, as a sunset on the beach. The grunts and screams of my fellow damned ring in my ears. I block them out as best as I can. There may be rest in this godforsaken place, but there's no empathy. That's why I'm suffering now. Still, can you blame me for looking out for number one? I work 70 hours a week as a hospital janitor to make ends meet. Let me tell you, you haven't seen shit until you've literally seen shit all over the place. People are disgusting. They do disgusting things when you're not looking, like stuff dirty diapers and paper towels down the toilet. Haven't they heard of garbage cans? I had to empty those. They were just as gross. I should have earned a fortune, but of course I didn't. After taxes, my take-home pay was shit too. Another fighter, another miser. I jump my chest forward as hard as I can and push. My bag of loot smashes into his. He tumbles to the muddy ground. A demon is on him in a flash, beating him with a braided whip. He howls in agony, struggles to get up, and falls again. After enduring another lash, the hoarder scrambles to his feet and shoves his way past me. The demon hands me a doubloon. I could save it and earn more coins for more rest. However, I'm not allowed to keep any more than I can carry in the holy pockets of my rags. I give it back. 60 seconds to catch my breath. 60 seconds to reassess my existence. A minute lasts an eternity here. I remember one chilly Friday in October. I was eating lunch in the cafeteria as I usually did. Rain drew down the nearest window pane, obscuring my view of the parking lot. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I didn't have much of an appetite for chicken tenders and wedges, but I needed protein and carbs to get me through the rest of the day. The food was hot, if a bit bland. I chewed it mechanically, reviewing my morning. 2 of our toilets overflowed. Shit, gigantic wads of soggy toilet paper littered the floor and leaked into the nearby stalls. The creators of this chaos had fled the scene. I wasn't happy. Neither was my supervisor, who objected to my use of colorful language when he entered the restroom. Like he never heard the word fuck before. He rolled me up, and I got even angrier. That was my second reprimand in 2 weeks. One more and my pay would be docked. I couldn't afford that. Not with the rent due and my car in the shop. Someone had left the day's newspaper on a nearby table. I went to pick it up. There had to be better opportunities for a college grad majoring in computer science. However, entry-level techs were everywhere. I had $40K in student loans to pay off. This gig kept me hanging on the skin of my teeth. The classifieds offered the usual jobs: truck drivers, CNAs, waitstaff, etc. An ad caught my eye. A background of stars and planets with a slogan: Gateway Travel. It's out of this world. Cheesy, I know, but it made me smile. I needed something to cheer me up on that dreary day. I checked out the place's address and phone number. It wasn't that far from the hospital. I made a deal with myself. If the rain stopped by the time I took my afternoon break, I'd leave early and scope Gateway Travel out. If not, I'd keep plunging away and forget all about it. I like to think the weather sealed my fate, but in hell, I know better. The rain had turned to a cold mist by the time 3 o'clock rolled around. I decided I needed to take the rest of the day off. Again, my boss wasn't pleased, but I didn't give a fuck. He wasn't the one who'd gotten down and dirty. Speaking of which, I had to dodge several puddles on the way to my destination. It was located in a strip mall, next to a Chinese restaurant and across the street from a shop called Cinderella's Curios. I smirked at the cutesy name, but had no intention of going there. The sign on the door to Gateway Travel read open. The place was small and unassuming, with travel brochures all over the walls. Most of them showed tropical paradises: Hawaii, Fiji, Jamaica, the Bahamas. There were several showing national parks too. I'd never gone to any of those places. Odds were, I never would. That didn't stop me from approaching the gorgeous receptionist. Hey, looking to go on vacation.
Then you've come to the right place.
She smiled with perfectly white teeth.
Welcome to Gateway Travel. I'm Rachel. I'll tell my boss you're here.
She pushed a button on the intercom and did just that.
Please have a seat. It'll be a few minutes.
I sat down, admiring the view of her cleavage. Rachel cleared her throat.
Excuse me. My eyes are up here.
Sorry. She sounded pissed, but when she winked at me, my insides got all hot. I whipped out my phone and looked to see if I had any new text. None. I was about to check my Instagram feed when a man in a business suit approached me.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Plutus. How may I help you today? Hi, I'm looking to get away from it all. Do you have anywhere special in mind?
How about Mars or the Moon? Those are less remote than the locations you're advertising.
No. Just somewhere far from this shittier city. I understand. What do you enjoy doing when you're away?
I've never been away.
Don't know. Relax, I guess. Veg out in front of the TV. You can do that at home. How about something a little more exciting? I run a casino you might have heard of. Lutz's Palazzo.
Hard pass. I don't gamble.
You don't have to. There are also shows you might find entertaining.
Sounds great, but I don't have the money right now.
I'm offering a complimentary voucher, good for tomorrow only.
Oh yeah? I'm still broke.
The buffet is excellent.
The thought of food barely appealed. Thanks, but no thanks.
How about I sweeten the deal? $200, come to your tab.
Seriously?
Seriously, sir.
You know what? You just made my day. It was true. The man was highly amusing in his rush to offer me free stuff. Nice place you've got here. I wish you luck, but I've gotta go.
Your name is Max Reyna. You're 28 with nothing to show for your bachelor's degree but $40,000 in a hole. You don't gamble. Not because you don't like it or because it's wrong, but because you're scared of digging even deeper. You hate your job and wish your supervisor would go to hell. I can arrange that.
What? No one can. You're some kind of scammer, aren't you?
No.
The words sent shivers up and down my spine.
I can make you a very, rich man. That's my domain. I am Lutus, the mythological god of wealth.
Okay, you're also insane. I'm out of here. I stood up, then froze. He held the voucher out to me. I stared at it.
See if I'm as good as my word. Come tomorrow to the local riverboat. The address is listed here.
I should have torn the voucher up. I took it and put it in my pocket instead.
Good man.
Mr. Plutus turned and left. Rachel waited for me to show myself out. I did, but not before asking her for her phone number. To my surprise, she gave it to me. I wish I could tell you that I came to my senses as soon as I got home. However, I thought there was no harm in going to Plutus's place and seeing if the voucher was genuine. If it was fake, I'd lose nothing. If it was real, what could I gain? Curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought him back. Saturday, my official day off, was as bright and clear as Friday had been gray and miserable. Jogging to the riverboat in the brisk fall air was a joy. A bouncer greeted me at the top of his gangplank. I handed the voucher over and he gave me a curt nod. How many other folks had gotten one of these? The casino was hella crowded. People sat at the banks of noisy slot and video poker machines, mindlessly pushing buttons and/or waiting for the autoplay feature to finish. Servers brought drinks which may or may not have been free. No one was at the roulette wheel, keno board, blackjack, or poker tables, which I thought was odd. Maybe they'd be active at night. I went to one of the vacant devices. It hungrily sucked my dollar into a slot that showed several rows of digital symbols. I pushed play. The symbol spun and spun. I realized I had a chance of winning any of the displayed rows. Unfortunately, none of the 777s, cherries, and bars ended up matching. Not even two. The machine played its loser theme and reset itself. So much for excitement. I vowed that I wasn't going to lose one more cent to that one-armed bandit. As I stood up and got ready to leave the riverboat, a cute cocktail waitress approached me and asked if I wanted a drink. Sure, I enjoyed alcohol, but didn't want to get drunk at. Whoa, what time was it anyway? My phone didn't get any reception, so I couldn't tell. There were also no clocks anywhere. If the head of the gateway travel was right, I had $200 on my voucher. Great, but what else could I do besides feed the monsters? Machines.
There you are.
Richard Plutus, wearing a snazzy red suit and black bow tie, came up to me.
I've been looking for you everywhere. Let me see your voucher.
I offered it to him. He scanned it with something that looked like a laser pointer.
Congratulations.
You're the lucky winner of a stay in my VIP lounge. Whatever you wish is my command, and everything is free. Drinks, games, girls, and so on. Girls? The creme de la creme, or if you prefer, the company of gentlemen. Nah, I'm straight. How long can I stay in the lounge? 3 hours, like I said. You're very fortunate.
Plutus led the way through the maze of occupied machines and empty table games. The riverboat seemed way bigger on the inside than the outside. Maybe that was because I could barely see in the dim ambient lighting. Another piece of hired muscle greeted us at the door to the VIP lounge.
Hey, boss.
He said, then glared at me.
Password. Asshole.
Plutus answered something that wasn't in English.
Lakram Subaamnya. Give him your voucher, Max. He'll keep it until your session is complete.
I obeyed. The bouncer punched in the code on the door's keypad, and it clicked open. Unlike the rest of the casino, the VIP lounge was brightly lit with velvet furniture and a crystal chandelier. Very classy. The female servers' outfits left nothing to the imagination. G-strings and tassels. I swallowed so hard it hurt.
Hi. What would you like?
One of them asked, pursing her full red lips. I almost said, you, but took a deep breath instead. I never got my club soda.
How about a real drink? It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
I smiled and shrugged.
What the hell? I'll have a double on the rocks.
It tasted so good going down. The burn in my throat, the ease with which the liquid flowed into my stomach, the aftertaste. What kind of bourbon was it? Not the kind I usually bought. This was top shelf, maybe off the shelf. After that, things got a little blurry. The waitresses brought me hors d'oeuvres, including stuffed mushrooms and chicken sautés. It was all scrumptious. I couldn't stop stuffing my face. I asked for another double. I heard the words, lap dancing free. I obliged. If this was heaven, I never wanted to get off the boat. In the corner of my eye, I spotted Plutus.
Having a good time?
He asked.
The best. Thanks for bringing me here.
My pleasure. At the Palazzo, unlike other casinos, luck favors the luckless. I knew you were a winner the first time I met you at Gateway Travel. Let's talk business.
I blinked.
Huh? This way.
He beckoned me with a finger. I tried to stand up, but my legs wobbled like crazy. I plopped back down in the velvet chair. He grabbed my hand. His felt like stone. Disgust swept through me. Did Plutus have bad arthritis? Once he yanked me to my feet, I followed him to his office. You know, the kind I'm talking about. Huge wooden desk polished to a mirror shine with a nameplate. Persian rug on the floor, real potted plant in the corner. Bookshelves lining the back wall. I wondered if there was a safe behind them.
No,
said Plutus. I jumped back. Had he read my mind?
Sit down.
I practically fell into the chair. Hardwood instead of velvet with a flimsy cushion.
You're Max. You can call me Rich. Hey Rich. Now that we're reacquainted, I'll get to the point. I need a partner. Someone who appreciates the finer things and hates it when circumstances get in their way. Someone hungry to improve their lot in life. Most importantly, someone who hates losing.
Rich dipped his finger into a pyramid shape.
Do you, Max? Hell yeah. In my lines of work, I face much competition. There are many other casinos and travel agencies in the area. I'm looking to expand. Name recognition and branding are everything, but so far, I've kept a low profile. That needs to change. You are skilled across several social media platforms, yes?
I nod.
Good. You'll help me increase my company's visibility and banish trolls and naysayers. Right. You'll also learn the trade of money management,
which isn't so difficult if you apply yourself. Stocks, bonds, hedge funds, I own them all. You'll receive a tidy share of the profits. Everything else you want will come along with it.
Like more strippers and booze.
Like a nice house and maybe some servants. If you so desire. 3 things remain. What of your job at the hospital? Fuck it. Someone else can clean up people's shit for a living. I'm all in. What of your current boss? Do you still wish him confined to the pits of hell?
The sooner the better. I hope he has a heart attack or stroke.
Harboring hatred in your heart can bring one on. All that stress.
I don't care. He's used and abused me at work long enough.
Understood. 3rd, the price for failure in our partnership is high. Are you willing to assume the ultimate risk? Your soul against your burning desire for wealth?
I don't think there is such a thing as a soul. But if you want to put it that way, then yeah. For some reason, I couldn't stop trembling.
Then, welcome aboard. Plutus and Rene has a nice ring to it.
I agreed. We shook hands, and his felt like a stone slab once again. He explained the password to the VIP lounge, which soon became my motto. Lucrum super omnia, profit above all. I quit my job, but under Plutus's mentorship, I made a lot more money and had a lot less anxiety. I was able to pay off my student loans. Rachel, the receptionist, and I started dating too. This progressed into the most wonderful relationship I'd ever had. When I asked her to marry me, she said yes without hesitation. Life was great. It even got more so when Rachel told me she was pregnant. I refused to admit that I was living in a house of cards. Plutus called me into his office on my 3rd anniversary of meeting him.
Max, my boy, have a seat.
This time I didn't fall into the chair.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on your progress. I've seen quick studies, but the business of finance suits you like water suits a duck. You've done a magnificent job managing my portfolios. Second, I hear you're about to become a father. Would you like a cigar? The finest from Havana.
I passed. I didn't smoke.
Ah, well, the next thing I have to tell you is quite, personal on my part.
I leaned forward.
Go ahead.
Plutus coughed into his sleeve.
As I told you at Gateway Travel, I am something more than a mortal. I'm a god, but not the omnipotent or omniscient kind. If I were, I'd have figured out the problem of mortality. I haven't yet. I only know a stopgap measure to hold off death, you know. In short, I need a new body.
I trembled all over, as I had before.
You need me. That's why you picked me. I'm young and strong and only 31. I can give you a nice long life. Indeed, you can, but I was, thinking of someone much younger. You want my child?
Plutus pointed his index finger at me like a gun.
Bingo. No way. I'll never give him to you. Or her.
I stated, breathing hard.
I don't think you understand. If you refuse me now, it will be as if you always had. Like if you'd gone to Gateway Travel and turned down my casino voucher. However, I can't rewind time. All I can do is cancel our contract and impose a penalty. The good things you have right now will disappear. Your career, your mansion, your employees, your wealth portfolio, everything, all gone for good. Rachel, too.
Plutus nodded.
That can't be. She loves me and won't leave me. She'll do as I say. We entered into a lesser arrangement since she works as my receptionist instead of my financer, but she's still responsible for upholding it. What did my wife want? To pay off her student loans. Lo and behold, I was Disappointed in her lack of ambition, but I gave her what she wanted. Also, free travel.
He grinned with a new set of teeth. Teeth that had points. I never noticed he had dentures before.
So, whether I say yes or no, you're still going to take my kid.
Another nod.
If you choose to give them up voluntarily, so much the better. Life will get even sweeter for you. You'll join the ranks of the multimillionaires. If not, I'm afraid the penalty is joining the ranks of the damned on my home plane. My travel agency is only a portal. I rule the fourth circle of hell.
Words fell out of my mouth that I regret every single moment I'm here.
Make me a billionaire instead. We have a deal. Your wife will have to agree to these terms. She is the child's mother. Don't worry.
Doubt flashed through my mind. She was so excited about our future bundle of joy that I was sure nothing could make her happier. Not even millions of dollars.
I'll convince her. You must. Otherwise, this new contract is null and void along with the old one.
My mouth fell open. Plutus shrugged.
I've told you risks were high.
When I got home, Rachel and I had the biggest fight of our 2.5-year marriage. She said she'd rather die than to give up our son or daughter to Plutus. I pointed out that she'd bargained with him too. Why hadn't he approached her? Rachel said he might. She had an appointment with him the next day. I told her not to go. She said she had free will and could do as she pleased. She also said that if this new deal was legit, she'd give anything to stop it, even her own soul.
You'd rather go to hell than save yourself and everything we've gained so far.
Rachel's eyes teared up.
Sacrifice, Max. It's what parents make for their children.
She stunned me with that statement. So simple, so true, so internally binding. The next day, we went to see Plutus together. He granted us 3 more years as billionaires. Although, we spent our money hand over fist. We donated a ton to charitable causes. We also got to know our adorable son, whom we named Caden Maximilian. We arranged for his adoption by mutual friends of ours. They didn't understand why do we give him up. We told them that we'd be going around the world on a luxurious multi-year cruise arranged through Gateway Travel, and needed someone to take care of him.
Selfish.
Our friend grumbled.
Never mind. I'll raise him to be a good boy who cares about others and doesn't let money get in the way.
Those words stung, but not as much as the truth. On December 31st of the 3rd year, Rachel and I went to Gateway one last time.
Greetings,
said Plutus, his skin looking like it was sloughed off his bones, just like a cooked Thanksgiving turkey.
I see you haven't brought me whom I seek. No, and we never will.
I squared my shoulders and squeezed Rachel's hand.
Then, you'll both accompany me to the emergency exit at the rear of this facility, which you've never used. Not even in a fire drill.
Plutus chuckled, then cackled, then howled in an unearthly rage. His human form morphed into that of a monstrous beast with a wolf's head and a man's nearly naked body. In a hilarious parody of modesty, he wore a gold lame loincloth. We were too terrified to laugh.
Bye, sweetie,
I said, my eyes welling.
I might never see you again.
Bye, honey. I might not ever see you again.
We embraced and said,
Bye, Caden,
before following Plutus at last. So, that's why I'm here. That's why we're here. You might think that we would have been saved due to our sacrifice, but that's not the way things work. Our contracts are as binding here as they were on Earth. As above, so below. The only breaks we've gotten are that we don't have to fight each other. We're both spenders, so we're on the same side. In that, we get glimpses of Caden from time to time. As our friend promised, he helped our son become an honest, caring man, unspoiled by the power of greed. Did he grow up hating us? No. He barely remembers us. That's part of the bargain. Our friend told him that we drown when our cruise ship has sunk. My next opponent is coming. Tall and reeking, he broadcasts a familiar smile.
Hello, Max. So wonderful to see you after all this time.
My former boss at the hospital, Scrooge 2.0, charges towards me. His bag of money bludgeons me in the chest. I fall to my knees. Before a demon could whip me, however, the monster Plutus arrives and devours his head. Blood and gore rain down on me, but I don't care. I feel baptized by it.
Thank you, sir.
I blubber in abject gratitude. Plutus grunts, then leaves my side. Some people are buying a stairway to heaven, but not Rachel and me. We chose hell.
Prison is hell. I hate it here. Granted, I deserve it. I'm currently locked down behind massive concrete walls and solid steel doors in a maximum security penitentiary. I was locked up what feels like a lifetime ago now. I earned it. I did. Every second I brought here is justice, but that doesn't change the fact that I hate it. It is cold here. I have a single concrete cot and toilet. My clothes itch and are too thin to keep any chills out. The walls are gray, with a sickly green tint due to the dull, swamp-like tile that sends a grossly colored glow into my room, reflecting the buzzing fluorescent light above me. The door is thick and unmoving. They painted the same shade of sickly green as the floor. I assume it is lead-based to save on cost. Maybe, if I lick it enough times, maybe I can kill enough brain cells to forget I'm here. I have no roommate, as many don't who are perceived as an extreme risk. Thankfully, I can still have time outside and shower without being entirely supervised. More than I can say for many in here. My only commodity is my toilet paper and my journal. I earned the journal through much work and good behavior. The pencil I write with is dull and has no eraser, like that a golfer would use to keep scorecards. I am allowed 4 hours per day with it, between breakfast and lunch. I received the journal and pencil with my meal and returned it in kind. If the pencil has any pieces missing or there are any extensive tears in the pages, then I will lose it for the following day. So I comply. I comply so I may have some mild comfort in this concrete cage in which I slowly die. Again, I definitely earned it. That doesn't change the fact that prison is hell. I earned my place here because I killed people. I killed many people. I killed 20, to be exact. This is the first time I've actually written it. I beat the cannibal's number, which for some reason gave me a sense of accomplishment. However, what gave me more satisfaction was the evenness of the number. 20, 2, 0, 2, 0. 2 0, 2 0, 2 0, 20. Even and smooth. My compulsion made it this way. 21 would have made getting arrested a living hell. 15 would have been okay, but 20 was much cleaner. Increments of 5, always increments of 5. Sometimes, during a shopping trip, I would grab a stick of gum so as to have 20 or 10 or 30 items even. However, in this case of the killings, it was much more intense. The problem was the itch I felt in between. It was a gnawing pain in my mind from 1 to 4 and 6 to 9. The itch was not as bad during 5s, but 10s were the best. However, that number will eventually attract attention. That number is partially what got me caught. But I had to scratch the itch, so to speak. It made me empathize with vampires in the old horror stories, the sensation of aching thirst that cannot be quenched. It is nightmarish. The same remained true for my age, 40. I finished at 40, which made me content. I hated not having an even age. I could force down the bad feelings my age ended in 5s or even numbers, but I always had bad years with 1s, 3s, 7s, and 9s. I digress. I understand it's abnormal behavior, but it's a compulsion. I have it manageable so that most would never notice in a day-to-day routine. I have to reminisce on these pages because I have no way of going back. It started many years ago, and the urge only grew from there. The first time I killed was interesting. I should have felt the need to immediately kill again, as I did in later years, but I didn't. They say mental illness worsens with age. I guess it's what kept me from acting again so soon, but I'm not sure. The first time I killed was pretty lackluster. I was walking home from school through the woods, where very few kids were bold enough to cross. While walking, I stumbled upon a man. He was clearly injured, and even at the age of 12, I knew he had little time left. He sat, holding his side, panting in labored breaths. He didn't see me yet. From my vantage point, I could see a long white bone jutting from his leg, which tells me the pain from what his ribs were doing was worse than that of a broken leg. That, or he was just in shock. Far above this section of the woods was a road. From what I could see, a vehicle burst through railing. The wrecked vehicle, a 69 Chevy C20 truck, lay decimated some 40 feet below the roadway in the brush and rocks. I remembered this truck because I wound up purchasing one many years later in a secret nostalgia for myself. Either way, the driver had pulled himself from the wreckage and crawled in agony upwards of 50 feet to the nearest tree, where his strength was slowly failing him. I remember seeing a large shard of metal which had been ripped from the side of the truck and picking it up. I walked slowly to the man who reached pitifully towards me for help. I slowly shoved the sharp edge of the metal into the man's throat and watched as the blood began to spurt from the wound in his mouth. He gargled like a drowning saw on his own blood, and after a time, he ceased all movement forever. It was a rush of which I cannot explain. The excitement of ending a human life is next to none. I was content for a fleeting moment. I stared at the body for some time before taking a bloody shred of his pant leg that was hanging by a thread. I just wanted to have a keepsake. That was my first kill. I was never caught, nor even suspected. Growing up in the mountains of the South allowed much privacy, and it allowed me to get away with murder. As time grew, so did the feeling of power and accomplishment. I felt like a god. No one even knew I was the way I was. I would never be a suspect because I knew how to hide. I hid well because I knew how to hide. From the time I was a boy, I knew how to blend in. Sometimes it was a challenge because of my appearance, but I learned a simple skill, how to hide in plain sight. Was able to work hard in the background. I made good grades and maintained very few close friendships throughout school, so no one would discover anything about me. However,
I made sure everyone had a nice thing to say about me, carrying groceries, helping kids with studying, always using manners. I graduated in the upper ranks of my class and soon attended the local college. After I earned a degree in business, I worked hard where I could and raised enough money to buy my own rig. I worked by riding the highways as a trucker for years and eventually bought 2 more rigs. By 35, I was a respectable business owner in my old town with a dispatch and a few drivers. I obviously still drove, even as the owner, because it kept me close to my only real passion. I hid well in plain sight because white people love a nigger. In a town of 90% white and 10% other, I learned to blend despite being a minority. Learn to talk like them, learn to walk like them, and you can manipulate them into whatever you want. I hate them. Not white people, all people. My mother died shortly after I graduated high school from heart failure, and I felt liberated, for I held her opinion highly. Her opinions often kept me in line and respectable. When she died, I was free to pursue my own interest. My father, while a good man in his own right, never held much weight in my actions, so I walked the path I chose for myself despite what his feelings may be. Either way, I dwindled for some time after the first murder. The urge slowly grew. By high school, I kept my eyes peeled for another opportunity to snuff out a life. Finally, that day came. The second time I murdered was equally uninspiring. I found myself at a graduation party and the whole senior class was drinking heavily. We were at the home of a wealthier student who had maintained a spotless record through both junior high and high school and wanted to go out in a way where she could get out of her proverbial box. I learned 2 things that evening. The first, that a well-mannered, well-educated young lady was no different than anyone else in regards to having a darker side. She wanted to be remembered for a party, not her good grades, not her generous deeds, not her modest manner of dress, but a party. Everyone has a dark side in some way. This was the first thing I learned. The second was that if everyone is drunk and dancing on the roof, you could bump a certain young lady discreetly enough to send her 3 stories down into the concrete and make it look like an accident. She landed with a smack that only could be replicated in my dreams. This was the first time I was aroused by a killing. I'm not sure why. She was in 2 pieces, which I assume her parents knew nothing about. Her skin was pale and smooth. Her deep brown hair flowed past her shoulders, and the look of utter confusion and terror on her face of innocence was priceless. Blood pooled from her head and seeped into her nearby swimming pool. I fancied her, you could say, but only because she represented something that does not exist. Human innocence. When her skull cracked hard against the pavement, I was instantly excited. I had to sneak away to handle it, and steal a memento from the girls' room. Meanwhile, the remaining partygoers descended into madness, trying to repair a situation that was far beyond broken. The chaos I caused that night again resurfaced my deep sense of accomplishment that only comes from death. This was the second time I killed. 18 years of age. By the time I hit my stride, I stood at 6'2", at 260 pounds. I had always enjoyed lifting weights and working towards my overall health. A fat predator is a bad predator. I maintained this level of fitness for most of my adult life. I had to in order to pursue my passion. Of course, things will have a way of catching up with me. I was incarcerated with an unfortunate mountain of evidence. I wouldn't say I covered every base perfectly to ensure not getting caught, but I felt like I was careful enough. I guess not, in hindsight. I remember the day I was arrested. I had turned 40 the month prior and was on the road delivering a shipment of plywood. I was behind the wheel of a rig in rural Alabama. I was taking the back road because I enjoyed the scenery, and when you're the boss, you can set your own schedule. At this point, I killed 19 people, and the itch was present.
I would have to rub the back of my neck when I thought about it. It needed to be scratched. It needed to take care of. That's when I saw her. Miles from any structure or any living person was a broken down baby blue Volkswagen Beetle. The emergency lights were flashing and a woman was looking into her engine compartment. The height of my truck allowed me to scan both her car and the area surrounding us. It was tall, uncut grass and trees covered in utter blackness due to the overcast night. There was no one for miles and miles. We could be alone together. I pulled in behind her with my low lights so as not to scare her. When I stepped out of the truck, I addressed her.
Pardon me, ma'am.
I said calmly, I know how to disarm. I have worked on my speaking voice for years in order to portray their security into my hands.
Are you alright?
She stepped out from behind her hood, and I saw her in better light. She was a young, Hispanic woman. Her clothes were tattered, but I think that was intentional. She had silky dark hair to her shoulders and black Liberian glasses. She was pretty, which was a bonus for me. Consider it like a dinner. You're going to get your meal, but when it includes dessert, then it is all the better. I also knew she could complete the cycle. She could be the 20th, and I could rest. Best yet, she was petite, so there would be little fight.
I think the engine is shot.
She said in a desperation that these dark woods certainly played well into. She just wanted to get out of the danger. Little did she know.
I can give you a ride. I own this company, so I can make the time.
I didn't want to sound presumptuous, but I knew by making myself a manager, it would remove the creepy truck driver mentality.
I don't know.
I promise. I edged, in my best zippity-doo-dah voice.
I'll take you straight into town. We can find you a phone. My wife would kill me if I let a young lady stay stranded in the woods.
I wasn't married. But that is another way of disarming her. A spouse always makes a man less dangerous, or again, as she thought.
Oh, okay.
She said, with her fear betraying her skepticism.
Thank you. I'll get the door for you.
As she walked to the passenger's side, I held the door open for her. As she took her first step, I grabbed her ankle and pulled her straight down with much force as I could manage. Her jaw connected with the studded metal stairs full force. I know some teeth were broken by the crunch that emanated from her skull. She fell limp to the dirt as I lifted her onto my shoulder. She didn't stare long enough for me to grab a large socket wrench from my rig. I could feel the warm blood from her mouth pouring down my shoulder. I carried her into the tall grass and just out of sight. We made love then. I had made love before to some, but this was special. She was the 20th. She could complete the need. Halfway through, she began to wake and struggle. From there, I had to act. I took the socket wrench and began to hit her. She struggled to scream due to her shattered jaw. I hit her in her pretty face over and 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 over again. When I had finished on all fronts, I took her wallet from her jeans off beside us. Hannah, I believe her name was. I took her glasses as they fell off when her face collided with the truck and avoided the wrath of the socket wrench. They had her name engraved inside the temple. I drove, leaving the scene entirely. I had to re-enter the highway sometime later and saw lights in my mirror. I had been stopped before, once even with a body in the back, so I was not worried. The officer walked to the side and called me out.
You Williams?
He asked with an unreadable demeanor.
Yes, sir.
I answered coolly, holding my ID and paperwork for the truck and delivery. He then spoke into his radio.
Yeah, we found him. Officer, what's this?
I was cut short.
Sir, please turn around and place your hands behind your back.
I demanded. I was not about to be cuffed and restrained for no good reason. He then turned me violently to my truck and slapped cuffs around my wrist. From there, he sat me on the pavement and called for backup. When other officers arrived, one finally noticed the blood on my back. Then they found the glasses. Then they found the poorly wiped down socket wrench. Then, They received word of a brutal mutilation several towns over. They had stopped me initially because one of my drivers was caught with a brick of marijuana, and they wanted to stop all trucks from my dispatch to make sure we were legitimate. It would be funny if it weren't so infuriating. I was brought down on a technicality. My run lasted 12 to 40. I was undetected for the entire time. I changed my MO. I killed strangers only. I was so careful. A technicality was the only thing that could have done this. My simple home was turned about until they found my treasure box, a shoebox of souvenirs and news clippings. From there, it was easy to put me at every single murder. Every homeless person stabbed to death in cities, every transient prostitute with their heads missing, every unsupervised child in crowded streets. I was linked to them all. Now, one may ask, why would you be so stupid as to keep mementos? To that I would say, I had to. It was my passion, and the only thing that gave me meaning. I had to keep something around. They were the only memories I could have of those times. Like I first wrote, I deserve to be in prison. I don't regret it in the slightest what I've done. The trial was grueling and irritating. Since I killed across state lines, there was arguments as to where to have my trial, but it became a federal issue, which only meant more bureaucracy. My lawyer explained many of the killings would be circumstantial at best, but just as many have my now connected DNA to the scene and are going to be nearly impossible to deny. I decided to throw in the towel. The media was out for blood, the public was out for blood, and the jury was out for blood. I had my fill, so now it was time to pay the favor forward. There was no way to avoid a life sentence, so I may as well come clean and get regaled the tales of my exploits to a room of terrified jurors and family members burning with hatred. Despite the difficulties of finding some evidence of murders, I was still convicted for 18 of the 20. However, I was punished for them all regardless. The day of sentencing, I stood still and stoic before the judge. I could feel the eyes of all those present attempting to sear me, but failing. The judge looked down at me and rambled on about my cruelties and resentment for man. The entire time, he droned. I stood with the thought that the death penalty was illegal in this state. It was utterly satisfying to know the uproarious crowds calling for my head when the law wouldn't allow it. I snapped out of it when he got to the sentence.
Seeing as how the death penalty is illegal in this state, I can only do the most with that in light. I hereby sentence you to 1,001 life sentences.
He was being melodramatic. Not in the history had there been such an absurd sentence. What's worse, the number was uneven, meaning the rest of my life I would have to say 1,001 when discussing my sentence. He knew this. My demeanor slightly shaken, I asked the judge, "Why 1,001? The courtroom was silent. The families, friends, and the jury looked at me with contempt, but that didn't matter then, even less now. The judge leaned over his podium, his smile with a smugness that still boils my blood, and he calmly replied,
"To torment you."
That's how I got where I am now. I don't interact with the other inmates or the guards. I just mind my business as best as I can. I don't like to think about the sentence because it makes me itch. Similar to when you haven't paid a certain bill but don't have the funds. It's a wrenching, mental discomfort. I write the rest of this in a testament to what happened yesterday in hopes it reaches someone on the outside. My day started normally. A loud bell rang and I stood to my feet. From there, my door opened and I walked to the shower facility. I tried to find myself at the end of the line so as to get the most time out of my cell. I also like my privacy. My fellow black inmates gave me hell for being crazy,
since African American serial killers are considered such an abnormality. The other races tended to stay to themselves, minus a few Aryan Brotherhood members casting an occasional slur my direction. I entered the shower as normal, but I felt an innate sense of dread that I don't know how to describe. I just felt unpleasant. I felt watched and alone at the same time. I felt completely hopeless and near despair. I quickly finished my shower and left the facility. The halls were quiet, and the stationary guard was not at his post in the front of my cell. I was alone in this hallway. Suddenly, I felt a large hand grip my shoulder and order me forward. The next thing I knew, I was being escorted to the warden's office. I was somewhat stunned, but complied. I walked the tight and close halls until I reached the last room on the right. Inside was totally dark, apart from a dim lamp illuminating at a desk. The hand shoved me in and slammed the door behind me. I saw the silhouette of a warden, and he beckoned me to sit. I sat across from him in an uncomfortable silence. He didn't move, neither did I. I would force him to make the first move. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke up.
Let's go over your file.
His voice carried, a mild southern accent sprinkled in. I did not respond. He gave no indication as to why, so I would bide my time. From here, I will paraphrase what was said, as my memory can't perfectly recreate the entire conversation.
Count 1. Confessed, not convicted. Man falls off cliff and you assist him in passing. You were 12, so it wasn't included in your file, but it warrants mentioning. Count 2. Confessed, convicted. You confessed to shoving a young woman off a roof, then robbing her home of a trophy. You were 18. Count 3. Confessed, convicted. Homeless man near your college. You stabbed him and cut out a tooth. You were 20. Count 4. Confessed, not convicted. You claimed to have shot a prostitute in Texas. The souvenir you took could not link you to the crime, and she had no family. You were 24, not convicted, but you know what you did. Count 5 through 9, confessed, convicted on all counts. You killed 5 lot lizards before changing your MO. That was smart. They were all strangled, and you kept a lock of hair, left them on the highway. Count 10, confessed, convicted. You took a lost 12-year-old and drowned him. You kept his retainer. You were doing well in life by this point, but murder still called, didn't it? Count 11, confessed, convicted. This one was special, wasn't she? That gas station employee who you stalked for a while, followed her home and broke in. Took your time and did it right. She broke your perfect streak. You were going to make her pay right. Kept her locket as a token of your affection. Count 12, confessed, convicted. You took a young man to your local club in Missouri. Strangled him the moment the door was closed. Chopped him up, kept his teeth. Counts 13 through 17. Confessed, convicted on all accounts. The hitchhiker phase. Here it seems you just wanted to close the gap. You got sloppy, left a lot of evidence behind. I guess because they were vagrants, it wouldn't have mattered. Count 18, confessed, convicted. You killed a housewife in Florida. You were on vacation at the time. You spotted her and just had to do something. Waited until her husband left and had yourself a time. Another rape and a strangling. You took her blood-soaked necklace. Count 19, confessed, convicted. You saw a jogger one morning and followed in your truck. When you knew their routine, you waited in the bushes until he passed. You killed him with a hammer, took one of his shoes. Count 20, confessed, convicted. The one that brought you down. You couldn't resist her. You were too careless, too excited. Now you're here. You took her glasses. and bashing her head in and assaulting her.
He took a deep breath, and his outline set back.
Do you know what they call you?
He asked me incredulously. I was livid. He completely bastardized my work. I had done so much, and he swept over it like an obituary column. I glared at him in the dark before answering.
The scavenger hunt killer.
I hated that name. They donned me the scavenger hunt killer because my murder spanned so far and I collected odd, disconnected items. Again, my works and efforts were reduced to a joke. It still makes me sick. The warden spoke up again.
Are you sorry?
I sat for a moment before responding.
Would it matter? No,
he said, settling in.
I guess it would. I don't get it really. You're a highly intelligent, healthy, and well-spoken man. Why on earth would you throw that away?
I sat in angry silence. I refused to give this man the satisfaction of an answer.
Do you believe in God?
The warden asked. His tone now changed. I chewed my tongue before responding.
No. Hit it.
He responded lackadaisically, as if my response didn't really matter.
That will make what I'm about to tell you much better.
I waited for him to continue.
Your sentence is being commuted.
I raised an eyebrow in disbelief.
Really? Yes,
he said, still shadowed, but I knew he was smirking.
What does that have to do with God?
I know I should have had much more important questions to ask him in that moment, but I was curious. I assumed he meant I should be thankful.
Well, that will make this next part easier. You passed away this morning, son.
Before I could respond, his hand tossed a few photos in front of me. It was me. I lay covered in blood on the shower floor. I had been stabbed from the looks of it.
Yeah.
The warden, or who I thought was the warden, spoke up.
Some Aryan fella wanted to prove his mind by stabbing a serial killer to death in the shower. It didn't work though. Says he was caught and will likely be in solitary until it does irreparable damage, if that's some comfort.
I stared at him. I stared at the photographs. I simply could not accept it.
This is absurd.
I felt insulted in the prospect.
I know it seems odd, but hear me out.
He sat upright, ready to make his case.
Do you know what the Universalists are? No. Well,
he continued without missing a beat.
Basically, it states that everyone gets into heaven, even if you aren't necessarily in their denomination. This is heaven.
I was ready to laugh. This was a joke.
No. See, that's the bad news. Catholics, Muslims, some Buddhists, see, they believe in the temporal plane, so they're also sort of right. See, everyone does eventually move on, but before anyone can move on, they must resolve all their earthly obligations and judgments.
Before I could remark, he caught his breath and explained further.
You died this morning. You serve one of your 1001 life sentences. Welcome to number 2.
I stood up.
This is funny. I'm leaving.
I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, unable to use my body. My eyes felt like they were being pried towards the seat.
Please.
I heard the warden, though his voice was now much deeper, sinking my gut.
Sit.
I returned to my seat with a sensation that was new to me. Fear.
Now,
he continued, his voice returning to normal.
You are not dead. You just started another sentence. Everything will be back to normal when you leave. When I dismiss you, you will leave here and return to your bunk. Do you understand?
I nodded, still stunned by what I then knew was true. His voice, the unexplained dread I felt that morning. I walked out of the warden's office that day, feeling a hopelessness I had never known. The prison was the same, but it wasn't. It was lonelier, darker. That felt like forever ago. I learned since then. First, lifetime does not mean from the age you are incarcerated. I expected a 40-year life sentence, but after speaking with a few other inmates serving like myself, who I see sometimes sparingly, I learned that it varies somewhere from 80 to 120 years. It varies, but it is always at least 80. I guess the guards don't notice after a certain point. Also, I assume they don't register, that we never seem to leave. Inexplicable, but that's what's happening. Second, each go-around changes you. The prisoners don't notice you. The others like you have fewer words. The guards seem always outside of the line of sight, even when they would interact. They were like fleeting shadows. I am cracking mentally. I will walk into the showers and see someone shaving, even speak with them at length. However, when I turn a corner or close the stall door, he'll be gone when I return. Next, I learned that suicide doesn't work. I learned the same way every inmate in here like me does. I slit my wrist and then just ached for a week. I swallowed bleach, had a miserable stomach ache, but no death. I hung myself where I choked and flailed, fully conscious for 8 hours straight until a guard found me while bringing me breakfast the following morning. I learned that being murdered decreases time, but murdering adds it. So no one on life row attempts murder here. Finally, escaping isn't an option. We have runners sometimes. Men who just finished their first sentence. The guy just snapped. I guess he pulled maybe 60 years before dying in his sleep. He just panicked and ran. The snipers didn't even turn. He grabbed the fence and immediately fell to the ground. From there, he shook violently. He died right there of a heart attack. I saw him a week later. Third life sentence. Half crippled. I guess we get punished if we try to leave. I don't know if it's permanent. He was a wreck upon returning. It reminded me of the cats in my neighborhood as a boy. The first time you heard it, the animal twitches and becomes neurotic. But given enough time, it accepts its fate. The man now spends his days staring silently behind dead eyes at whatever light source is around. To some, this is limbo, where we remain trapped in this prison in which we were condemned until our body and soul have finished their sentences. To others, this is some kind of purgatory, where we are groomed for eternity in paradise. Either way, we are forced to remain, forced to live until we pay our dues, never truly dying. I don't even know if time is the same now, but if you're reading this, I managed to successfully get these pages out. I have a handful of plans, which I cannot record. I cannot risk any future attempts should this fail. I'm leaving this journal for anyone who is a criminal or wants to become one. I have between 80,000 to equally 100,000 years left. I do not feel remorse, but I do wish I knew then what I know now. This is simply a warning. 100,000 years on a concrete slab, a hard, unforgiving surface. 100,000 years with 1 hour a day and a dying earthscape I could barely recognize. 100,000 years of sickly green floors and cold steel doors that move for nothing. 100,000 years of mopping floors or scrubbing toilets. 100,000 years of being monitored by beings I cannot fully comprehend as their burning horror erupts in the back of my mind. 1,001 life sentences. 1,000 to go. Only one small thing gives me comfort. With 1,000 life sentences, at least, it's a nice clean number. I hope I don't die too soon and ruin this nice, even lifetime. Because the next one will be hell. Do you play video games, Terrence?
The devil asked, as he sat perched atop the podium. I held my wife's dying body in my arms, and tears streamed down from my face and her blood covered my bare chest. I looked up with a mixture of hate and incredulity. What? The devil stared back intently. In an instant, he flashed from the podium to appear 2 feet in front of me, kneeling over to look me in the eyes.
You have to be a gamer. What are you? A white male in your mid-20s. You're the target demographic.
The devil stood straight and adjusted his pinstriped suit.
Regardless, let me tell you the rules, my boy.
I looked around me, desperately trying to find an exit to escape with my wife. I realized the chapel around me had vanished. Only a thick fog surrounded us. The only thing I could see clearly was the podium and the well-dressed devil.
Dark Souls. Ah, yes. A game for true patrons of the arts. You know of it.
The devil noticed I wasn't paying attention and flicked his hand at me. An unseen force jerked my head around to look at him. Yes, I've seen videos of it online, I stammered fearfully. The devil's dirty yellow eyes stared back at me. Then he smiled, showing his sharpened teeth.
Good, but let me explain how the game works, just for transparency's sake.
The devil walked back behind the podium like he was about to give a lecture.
Dying repeatedly is a main gameplay mechanic in Dark Souls.
The devil spoke in a monotone voice while combing his hair around his horns.
Your character revives, hopefully have gained knowledge on how to be a better player. Hopefully, you learn from your mistake as you traverse back into the abyss. Every path you open stays open. Every item you find, you keep after death. But dying causes all of the enemies you killed to return to life also. Do you understand?
Yes, I mumbled. I still couldn't turn my head to look away from him.
Good. The thing I most enjoy about the game is its lack of hand-holding. So for now, all you get is this.
He walked over to me and produced a large scarlet red key from his pocket.
Only this key will unlock the outside gate. Unlocking the gate is the only way to stop the cycle from resetting. The only way to free yourself.
The devil let out a sigh and returned the key to his pocket.
That's enough for now. Do better this time, will you?
He made a go-away gesture with his hand, and I felt myself falling. Me and my dying wife tumbled into infinite blackness. The podium and the devil raced away from us. An immense heat enveloped me, and I cried out in pain. I awoke in the dark basement, the same one I had just left. My mind was foggy, like I had been drugged. I looked to my side and saw my wife laying there naked beside me. It was a serious case of deja vu. I had just been here. Me and my wife had awoken in this basement. We'd just traveled up the stairs. That's where the man in the robe attacked me. I looked down at myself. Something was different now. I had pants. The first time, I was naked like my wife. I had taken the pants from the roadman after he fell down the basement stairway. My wife had found a blue tarp to cover herself the first time. It was quickly abandoned for being too noisy to sneak with. I reached over to shake her. "Jenny, wake up." Wait, Jenny had been stabbed, hadn't she? I launched myself over next to her. I rolled her over to inspect her injury. Nothing was there. No deep wound from the knife. She was fine. Terry? She spoke groggily. Her eyes fluttered open and she sat up to look around. Where are we? We're back in the basement. That thing brought us back here. What thing? She asked. She quickly noticed that she was naked and covered herself up with her arms. She looked to her side to see a ratty blue tarp hanging over some junk. She snatched it and pulled it around herself. What's going on here? She gasped. I stared at her for a moment before asking in a measured voice, "What do you remember last?" Jenny blinked. I could see the cogs beginning to turn in her head. "We were at Michelle's and David's wedding rehearsal." She squinted and tilted her head. "We were walking to our car. You had to park in a different parking lot away from the venue." She paused. "I don't remember getting to the car." I waited for her to continue, but she just looked around the dusty basement. "That's it? You don't remember waking up down here? You don't remember that asshole that attacked us and fell down the stairs? You don't remember the devil stabbing you and giving me a speech about video games?" "No, babe," Jenny replied. She gave me the look she routinely used when she thought I was overreacting. "We've never been here before. Are you okay?" What was going on? The horned bastard said something about a cycle resetting. Had he reversed time? No, it couldn't be. He drugged us somehow and threw us back down here. But how did Jenny's stab wound disappear? "Come on," I said, as I grabbed Jenny by the hand. I pulled her towards the stairs. Her blue tarp crinkled loudly. We carefully went up the stairs and I opened the door slowly. The same wood-paneled hallway greeted me. It smelled of old wood and mold. The short hallway stretched on 10 feet before turning to the left. That's where I had run into the big man in the robe last time. I told Jen to wait and crept down the hall to peek around the corner. There he was, again. The same big guy with an ugly face and crazy eyes. He even screamed the same damn thing. "Your blood will flow eternal," he screamed as he rushed at me. I retreated down the hallway. It had to be his twin or something. I didn't struggle with him like the first time I did. I would set him up for the same move I used on him before. There's no way he would be that stupid to fall for it again. I scampered back to the doorway by the stairs. Jen screamed and flattened herself against the wall. The idiot came barreling at me at full sprint. I caught his momentum, crossed my leg, and performed a textbook hip toss. His speed and weight caused him to become airborne before cracking down hard on his head halfway down the steps and tumbling the rest of the way. He lay very dead at the bottom, his leg twitching a little. Jen screamed louder and I stood dumbfounded. The idiot didn't remember. I had killed him the same exact way the first time. I had fought him for longer, trying to wrestle him to the ground before I realized I was about to be pushed down the steep stairs. It was a cycle. Time had repeated. I finally calmed down Jenny to follow me back down the hall. We turned the corner to enter the waiting room or foyer for the chapel. 2 large double doors led further in. Opposite of it were the doors leading outside. Jenny went to open the exit doors and I stopped her. "Don't bother, it requires a green key to unlock." I felt like I was going to throw up. "Like a video game," I spat out. Like before, our only option was to go deeper into the chapel. I told Jenny to wait outside. She got stabbed the last time. I opened the double doors slowly. A familiar sight greeted me. A small, windowless chapel. Dark drapes hung from all 4 walls. Strange symbols and writing were spray-painted all over them. Looking too long at these symbols made my head hurt and my vision blur. 3 short pews on either side of the aisle. At the end of the aisle were 2 robed men, kneeling and praying to the podium. These are the assholes who held me down while that devil stabbed my wife in the belly. She didn't even act like she saw him when he was upon her to kill her. He just walked up and struck her while she screamed at the men to let me go. "Not this time," I said to myself, as I scanned the room for something to use as a weapon. I saw a small box to the corner of my right. Wait. No way, it was a chest. Like a treasure chest. I snuck over to it. The 2 men continued low mumbling prayers. I placed my hands on both sides of the ornate chest, More crazy symbols were carved into its wood. I opened it slowly while leaning away. I've played my fair share of games with booby-trapped chess. When I finally looked in, I almost laughed. Nestled within red, soft felt fabric was a short flintlock pistol. I picked it up. It felt heavy and was already cocked back. Tiny grains of what I assumed was black gunpowder sprinkled out of the side of the gun. I had seen movies where soldiers and pirates manipulated the weapon. That didn't make me an expert, but I hoped it was all set to fire. I noticed the praying had stopped. I looked over to see the two men standing and looking for me. Looking up put me in the view of one of the cultists. He saw me and gave a short scream. Instead of running down the aisle and turning, he was going to be a Pentecostal and jump the pews and come straight for me. As he got to the last pew, all I could see was the crazy in his eyes. He was coiled like a spring ready to jump at me when I leveled the pistol and fired. A blast of smoke and noise rocked my senses, followed by a loud thump. When my vision cleared, the man had toppled off sideways to land headfirst in a crumpled pile beside me. I didn't have time to think as the other man was on me instantly, screaming and swiping at me with a small knife. I held my arms elbows outwards to defend myself. I felt quick slashes across my arms. As he got closer, he reared back to stab me in the gut. I whacked him across the head with the barrel of the pistol. It was a heavy smack that stumbled him backward. As he looked at me, trying to regain focus, I saw red lines of blood begin running down his face. He screamed again and came in with a lunge. That's when I saw Jenny knock him in the ribs from behind with a bat. He stumbled sideways into the pews and dropped his knife. He was bent over and barely holding himself up with his hands. I launched in to deliver a tremendous elbow to the side of his head, laying him out on the stone floor. I looked up at Jen. She had dropped the tarp to help me. Now she stood there terrified and naked, cradling the bat. "Where did you get that bat?" I asked. "On the opposite side of the room. It was just laying on a table. You're bleeding." "It's nothing," I said, as I moved to pick up her tarp. I ripped off a string to wrap around my forearms. She covered herself again and followed me to the podium up at the front. "If I know video games, there's something important here," I said as I walked around it. I kneeled closer to look at a small wooden box carved with the same head-throbbing symbols. I opened it and let out a laugh. It was an ornate green key. "Come on," I said, as I snatched the key and marched back down the aisle to the foyer. Jenny crinkled noisily behind me with her tarp. When I got to the double doors, the ornate key slid in smoothly. "We're making progress," I said, looking back at Jenny. "We need to find you some clothes next." Jenny's face filled with terror as I felt the door being ripped open. I looked back to be staring at someone's well-muscled chest. I looked up to see a face shrouded with clear plastic tarp, a rope tied tightly around the thing's neck. Fog from the thing's breath sucked the bag in and out. I tried to step back from the giant, but he swung on me with the meat cleaver, biting onto the side of my neck. He then grabbed me by the head and launched me outside past him. I flew off the small front porch to land face first in the dirt. I tried to get up, but didn't have the strength to push myself up. I could see my lifeblood pooling out before me. I heard a scream as Jenny landed on the ground in front of me. I reached out to her, and she to me. The giant stomped over to tower over Jenny. I tried to call her name, but only gurgled out blood. The cleaver came down to bury itself in her head. Her eyes bulged and she shook slightly. Then everything paused. Jenny froze in her spasms, and the giant froze bent over. My pain stopped and I noticed I was no longer choking. A pair of shiny dress shoes walked over to stand in front of me.
"Get up,"
said the devil, as he looked down on me, disappointed. I sat up and stared at my wife.
"Don't worry about her, you dunce. She will be alive next cycle,"
the devil said with exasperation.
"I need to tell you about this giant that just killed both of you."
He waved both his hands over to the leaning giant.
Every time you reset the cycle, nobody will remember a thing, except for your nemesis here. He will remember everything and be able to hunt you through every cycle.
I stared in awe at the muscled giant with the plastic bag over his head. How unfair could this get? Fighting to save both of us was already hard enough.
I know, I'm pulling from other games, but I love the concept of an archenemy.
The devil prattled on.
If you want the game to stop, you can either escape or pledge your soul to me.
Never, you freak. I'll beat your game, I yelled back. The devil sighed.
Then do better this time, will you?
He snapped his fingers and the world went blank. I woke up in the basement, feeling like I had been drugged. The cycle repeated over and over and over. I'd wake up in the basement, make a little progress just to be murdered, over and over. The concept of time faded as my suffering grew within this cruel game. Last I counted was cycle 452, and that was a long time ago. I'll have to admit I gave up for a while. The cycle broke me. I would just sit in the basement, unresponsive to my surroundings, ignoring Jenny's questions until the giant freak would find me. The first dozen times he went straight for the kill, whacking me right across my head with a plethora of different weapons. Usually something new every time he came in. That wasn't so bad. It was almost peaceful. I used that time to clear my mind. I got so good I could block out everything, even block out my nagging wife. And since I couldn't sleep, I used the times in the quiet basement to think, before he would storm in and murder me. But he got wise to my plan. He wouldn't go for the kill. He would torture Jenny. He would pull her apart and let me listen to her screams. I'd try to shut them out. But it was only temporary. The cycle would reset and she would be fine again. Then he started torturing me. He would bring a bag full of tools to cause me pain. This had more of an effect on me. How selfish was I to put Jenny through this when I couldn't handle it? And then there was the insistent ponderings of the suit-wearing devil. Every time he took me into the foggy purgatory before the cycle repeated, he explained he hadn't frozen time, but a microsecond would have passed every time the cycle started over. He told me the tragic story of his unlife, how the judgment day awaited him and his kind at the end of time. The devil expressed his abject horror at this, so he used his powers to reverse time as much as he could. But alas, time still ticked forward, slowly but surely. When I went into my state of depression, just sitting there doing nothing, he didn't react at first. He said a lot of his playthings hit this wall at some point, but when I refused to snap out of it for cycles, he told me lack of activity would forfeit my soul.
This happened to a couple of my playthings too.
He chided at me.
There are more ways to agree to defeat than giving verbal confirmation. I had one plaything who would take his life every cycle, use the bag to suffocate himself.
These words took a while to breach the fog in my brain. Wait, the nemesis was another player? I asked.
Ah, yes, very much so. I'm not as cruel as my brethren, though. Just like you have a chance to escape, he still has one.
How? I almost screamed. The devil smiled and put his hand over his mouth.
I only give players information, not quitters.
Then I'll play, I yelled at him. A warm smile washed over his pointy face, and he let out a relieved sigh.
Oh, good, good. Just remember, please do better this time.
The cycle restarted and I sat up straight. I immediately grabbed a set of handcuffs I had acquired from one of my cycles and scooted over to unconscious Jenny. I cuffed her hand to a metal pole running down the middle of the room. She was now in a long robe I had found for her, but I couldn't have her following me. I stood up and ran to the trick wall I discovered in the basement. I pushed it open to reveal a short set of stairs leading up into the night sky. As I took the first step, I heard Jenny call after me. I ignored her. I stepped out into the estate property and looked around. I had the entire estate mapped out in my head. The chapel held the green key, which unlocked the graveyard. The graveyard held the blue key, which led to the cellar of the giant manor. The manor held the black key, which led into the actual manor. And I hoped the manor held the scarlet key. My chance to escape. I began to sprint towards the cellar of the mansion at the middle of everything. I wore a pair of overalls with utility belts with a crossbow and a knapsack over my shoulder. I was still barefoot. None of the shoes I scavenged fit me. Like clockwork, the Rottweiler caught my scent and came barreling out of the bushes of the house. I had wrapped straps of leather around my left arm. I bent low and offered it to the dog. He bit down on it and tried to shake me off of my feet. Like a million times before, I pulled out a K-bar knife, and excuse me, but this was my life and this was a game here. I jammed the knife up through the dog's head. The dog whimpered and convulsed. I felt terrible the first times I'd done it. Worse than having to kill humans, but now I felt nothing. Just cold. I slung the dog off to fall dead to the ground and began walking to the cellar doors. I flung them back to release the same bats that always escaped into the night sky. The stairs went down into darkness. I ignored the torch on the wall. I had found a flashlight already. The flashlight did little to show the way down to the 40-foot descent. It didn't matter. I knew the way through the wine cellar maze. I turned its corners and dodged its traps. I walked up to the cultists hiding in wait to kill me, only to kill them with brutal efficiency. The first one always jumped down from behind me with a fearsome yell. I would quick turn and put my K-bar knife into his neck before he could lift his heavy axe. The next one would wait for me to pass a dark alcove between the shelves before shooting me in the back with a crossbow. I snuck up to reach through the shelf behind her and grab her by the throat and her knife too. I knew how to avoid the other 5 hiding in the dark. Then, I would come to the door that led up into that house. 2 big bastards guarded it. I had fought them enough to learn who was the slower of the 2. My crossbow zipped right into the middle of the quicker one's dark hoodie, and he collapsed like a sack of bricks. The slower one pulled a sharp hand scythe from his robes to meet my charge. I screamed his name at him. Teddy! He freezes for an instant for me to slice across his weapon hand. He drops the scythe with a yelp and steps back. Too late. I'm inside his reach and slash him across the throat with a brutal swipe. He dies quicker than normal. It must be because I'm angry. I run up to the locked door and produce the black key from my knapsack and open the door into the manor. It gets harder from here, like cultists in armor with poison knives. Maybe I could unlock the front door to the manor and save myself the trip through the cellar. A thunderous explosion erupts behind me. I turn to see the giant, with overalls and a plastic bag tied over his face, storming through a destroyed wine rack he just busted through. He delivers a crushing fist to the center of my chest, sending me bursting through the unlocked door. I struggle for breath as he stalks up to stand over me. I dig the K-bar into his foot. He lets out a grunt of anger and reaches down to seize me by the neck and yank me up to eye level. "Kill me, you son of a bitch!" I wheeze at him, the sack on his face expanding and deflating rapidly with his angry huffing. "I'm never gonna give up like you, sack boy!" I spit. This makes him mad. He reaches up and puts a nasty hand around my mouth, and with a jerk, painfully snaps my head to the side. I awake in the basement. Damn it! Time to try again. I use the next couple of cycles mapping out the manor. I do unlock the front door eventually and get a sweet shortcut past the cellar. I kill a bastard with full plate armor. Now I'm wearing partial plate armor to not slow me down. Somehow the giant's in the manor now. He must have a skeleton key. I don't know how he bypasses all the locked doors. I can't outmaneuver him. He cheats too much. He cheats. Maybe I should cheat. I go back into meditation for a couple of cycles. Jenny screams at me from her handcuffed position, but I ignore her and plan. When the giant asshole finds me, I don't give him the satisfaction of an easy kill. I taunt him about his plastic sack. I taunt him about how he gave up and I'm still going. He makes me pay for it, but I take a piece out of him each time. I never kill him, but I make him bleed. I learn his tactics. I seek him out and go straight for him. And finally, when I think I've seen every move and counter, I'm prepared to enact my plan. If I open the gate door, I'm free, right? I ask the devil in the purgatory between cycles. He turns to me, curious.
Yes, Terrence. Those are the rules.
I mean, no BS. I don't need the key. I just need to get through? The devil laughs.
Sure, my boy. But you know it's electrified. You can't climb it.
I need your word. I just need to get through the scarlet door. A sly look crosses the devil's face.
You have my word, I dare say. You have my attention. The fire in your eyes is delicious.
Let's restart the cycle, I say, cutting him off. He guffaws at me and waits for the cycle to repeat. When I was a kid, my father had a chess game on the family computer. He taught me how to play, and I could only make progress against the enemy AI when it was set to very easy. I would challenge myself by playing against the computer when it was set to expert. I wouldn't make it more than 5 turns before I was defeated. No matter how hard I tried, the AI knew all my moves in advance. You see, it was programmed to react to well thought out and measured moves. But I discovered I could last a lot longer if I would randomly place a piece every other turn. The computer would try to make sense out of nonsense. It would throw its whole plan off. That's where the AI failed. It didn't account for random human stupidity. It had plans and counterplans for everything. But not for a 10-year-old boy having fun. I found what I needed in the back of the chapel. I had to kill the 3 guys again and search further back behind the podium. I found a dirty red glass container sloshing around about half full. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. I had to backtrack back to the graveyard. When I had first come through the graveyard, I had ignored the shed at the corner of the property. I saw it was guarded by a creepy guy hunched over eating something. The first time I had come through, I focused on the giant angel statue where multiple baddies guarded the key to the cellar. But now I was back at the shed, looking for what I needed. The hunched-over man took a crossbolt to the neck. The creature stood up and spun to face me. That's when I realized I was wrong. It was a woman. A saggy, balding woman. She ran towards me with blood and spittle foaming out of her mouth. She was eating a possum. The sight of her ugliness sent me reeling back, but she latched on to me and took a bite out of my shoulder. I stabbed her repeatedly with the gut in my K-bar. After a good minute of thrashing and kicking and scratching, she fell off of me dead. I was bloodied and beaten. She had been a tough one. Whatever she was guarding had better be worth it. I kicked open the shed door with my knife raised to stab. It was a dusty shed covered with cobwebs, boxes of crap everywhere. I started searching and I came across 2 treasures. One was a machete, sharp and slick with oil, and the other was a can full of lighter fluid. I stored it in my knapsack and looped the machete in my belt. I was briskly walking back to the chapel to drop off my loot. I exited the graveyard's gate to see a familiar figure, the giant. I brandished my new machete in front of me. Time to try out my fancy new weapon. I let out a haggard cough that doubles me over. I threw up on the ground. My whole body was shaking and I broke out in a cold sweat. Oh God, this woman had poisoned me. The giant saw this and began stalking me with his massive shovel. A deep chuckle emitted as a rumble from his throat. I wasn't going to let this monster have his way with me in my weakened state. I fired my crossbow into his crotch. The giant turned just in time for the bolt to stick into his thigh. I did this to him a lot, so he expected me to attempt a nut shot. He roared at me and began to sprint the rest of the distance between us. I pulled out my K-bar and ran it across my neck. I fell to my knees as my lifeblood flowed out of me. The giant was upon me, his shovel raised to cave in my head. But he froze as I entered the smoky purgatory. I could breathe again and the bleeding stopped. I turned to see the devil standing behind me, looking disappointed.
Are you going to start killing yourself every time your nemesis shows up?
He asked. No, I'm just not going to let him butcher me when I'm half dead already. Can you spare me the pep talk and just restart the cycle?
Oh. Does Plaything have a little plan?
He whispered to me. Come on, let's do it, I tell him. I sat up in the basement. I was nervous. I had been working on my plan for hundreds of cycles. Now that it was time to do it, the fear of failure was overwhelming. I gathered up my things, the knapsack with the gas canisters, the K-bar, and the machete. I dropped everything else, like the crossbow, bolts, tape, hammer, and my plate armor. I did get the duct tape and taped it all around my torso, neck, arms, groin, and legs. It was uncomfortable as hell, but it would keep my body running in times of trauma. Another thing I remembered from my past. I came down with a cold in high school. It was a 3-day cold I milked for 5 days. My parents suspected I was faking by the 5th day, but I would not relent to the truth. With a promise to catch up on schoolwork over the weekend, they agreed to let me stay home. But no video games, no Cartoon Network, only the History Channel. This was back when the History Channel was no joke. Reenactment of biblical battles, Jack the Ripper, mafia shootouts, World War II raids, and battles from the very current War on Terror. It was one of these War on Terror documentaries that got my attention. And they did a short history of fighters who would take their own life. Of course, they mentioned the kamikaze pilots and bombers, but they even went deeper into the Crusades. Specialized Arab forces, literally the first guys to be called assassins, knew they didn't stand a chance against the heavily armored knights and cavalry of the invading Christians. So the Arabs would wrap up fighters tightly in cloth like mummies and give them copious amounts of drugs. These soldiers would barrel into the heathen Christian forces with a holy berserker fury and taking fatal hits to just continue fighting. The drugs pump energy and dull pain, and the tightly wrapped cloth holds the body together and reduces bleeding. So, you see where I'm going with this. I clasped the handcuffs around Jenny's hand and secured it to the pole. She woke up and looked at me questioningly. I took the time to lean in and smile at her. Remember when we lived in that shitty apartment complex together? I asked her. She looked around at her surroundings in confusion, like she had done hundreds of times before. Remember, we came up with a code word. A word that communicated something bad was happening, and we either needed to run, fight, or call the cops. Do you remember what that word was, Jen? She blinked at me before answering. It was pineapple. We would say something about pineapples. I smiled and caressed her face. That's right, babe. This is a pineapple situation. I'll explain everything to you when we get out of here. I love you. And with that, I left through the secret passage out into the night. I killed the dog for the 100th time and found the giant manor. I circled it, pouring out the gas and lighter fluid. In a shed behind the house was a broken-down riding lawnmower. The first time I approached it, I had stepped in the bear trap hidden under the hay. This time, I walked around it to stick a cloth into the gas tank. I pushed the old mower out to park it on top of a hidden exit from the manor. Next came the fire. For a bunch of cultists obsessed with lighting spooky candles, It was relatively easy to gather matches. I lit small fires around the house, eventually causing the whole thing to be inflamed. The shed went up easy with the dry hay, and so did the lawnmower. Only the front door was left alone. Now I waited by the Scarlet Gate. The brick wall around the property stood 10 feet high, with electrified razor wire at the top. The doors to freedom were ornately carved obsidian double doors, with melting demon faces and those mind-numbing symbols. A giant scarlet circle sat in the middle with a keyhole in the center. I sat down by it and watched the manor burn in the distance. Nobody left the building. Those inside stayed to burn alive. That's how committed they were to the game. I learned of this from trying to coax them out of their designated zones on many occasions. And here he comes, the limping giant, his left leg bleeding and mangled. It seems somebody put the bear trap by the front door for the giant to step into while trying to escape the flames. As he got within 30 feet, I stood up to face him, unsheathing my machete. I fished a small village out of my pocket. The cultists in the manor would snort this before running at me like maniacs. Remember my suicide mummy plan? I popped the cork off the vial and slammed the thing down my nose. I felt a million stars of electricity rush throughout my body. I felt warm. I felt good. I felt alive. I quickly drew the flintlock pistol and aimed it at his groin. He put his hands down to cover himself, and I aimed upwards to shoot him in the face. A small hole appeared in the plastic covering his face, and he sucked in and out wetly as blood filled the sack. He came rushing towards me with a meat tenderizer, and I dodged every lumbering swing he threw at me. The ones he did land on me were only glancing blows that barely fazed me. I had learned all his moves for the last hundreds of cycles. I had thrown every crazy attack I could think of to see his reaction. And best of all, I had let him kill me every time to think he was still better than me. I thanked a blow to the shoulder to slice off his finger for him to drop the meat mallet. I cut his Achilles tendon and sliced the soft bends in his elbows. He struggled to keep up with me, but eventually, he fell to his knees. Eventually, he gave up, just sagging his shoulders and gurgling in his blood-filled sack. I feel disgust towards him. How many times had he killed me? How many times did I fight till the very end? Now that I have the upper hand, he gives up? I see now why he never escaped the cycle. I walk up to him and look him in the eye. I can see it through the blurry sack. I shoved the K-bar through his temple with a wet thunk. "Not this time, friend," I say sarcastically. "Please do better next time, will you?" I say as I raise my machete. I mimic the devil's voice perfectly, having heard it many times. The giant eyes light up, and he springs forward with unnatural speed to tackle me. His one hand holds my machete arm out and away from me, while his other wraps around my throat. He looms over me, the bloody sack leaking his blood all over my face. I scream at him as I feel him crushing my throat. I can't believe how stupid I was. I let him get a hold of me. All my planning. Now he knows my tricks, and now I die again. Something hits the giant from the side. He grunts and loosens his grip. Another thwack is heard, and I see the K-bar being driven further into his head. The giant lets go of me and sits up, looking at whoever is hitting him. And I see her, Jenny, scared to death and screaming. She swings again with the hammer and he catches her arm. I sit up and swing my machete with all my strength to embed the blade right into his face. The giant lets go of Jenny and she delivered a final blow into the giant's eye. The giant topples backwards and thumps to the ground. I stared at the dead giant and then at Jenny. And how did she get here? She didn't have the cuffs on. She looked at me furiously. "You don't say pineapple and then leave me, asshole!" she screamed at me. I couldn't help but smile. She must have found the handcuff key and all the junk I left. How dumb was I? This whole time I was protecting her and she had saved my ass twice. At least you're not naked this time. I laughed. She looked at me confused. I scooted over to the dead body of the giant and began patting him down. I was beginning to panic as I found nothing in his overall pockets. Jenny questioned me and I ignored her. Finally, I thought to check his neck, and there around a leather loop was a key. A skeleton key. He had a skull and crossbones on it. The devil was oh so obvious. Let's just hope he lets it open the scarlet door. Even if it didn't, the giant no longer had it, and I could speedrun the whole area. I walked to the door. Jenny picked up on the importance of this moment and quietly followed me. I half expected a serious shock as I placed the key in the keyhole. Click, and it opens. The world returned to the smoky limbo. I half expected the devil to be furious, but he threw open the double doors and cheered.
Well done, my boy. Good show.
He yelled as he began clapping.
And the miss is coming with the save at the end. Mwah.
He gave a chef's kiss. So, it's over. We're free, I asked.
Well, one of you is free.
He replied. What? No, you said.
I said it ends the cycle.
He interrupted.
For one of you.
His demeanor stiffened and he stared at me with his yellow eyes.
Either you are free and she dies here, or she is freed and you become my new hunter.
He stated flatly.
Come on, I'm a devil. You knew there would be a catch.
I would love to say I selflessly sacrificed myself for Jenny to be free, but I had been here for ages, and all I wanted was freedom. But what was freedom without saving the woman I loved? I sat there for the longest time. I considered every possibility. I had no doubt I could make someone quit if I was a hunter, but what sort of existence is that? Damning people to hell? The devil stood by patiently, letting me decide. I looked up at Jenny, frozen and terrified. She was my hidden weapon. All I needed was her the whole time. I couldn't abandon her. I reject both your offers, I finally said. The devil raised his head to look at me curious. Instead, let's up the ante, I said. Now I had the devil's full attention. Put us back in the game and let us both play. Let us both remember. Don't wipe her memory every time. I saw a sparkle in the devil's eye. Make it harder. Make it 2 hunters, whatever. We'll both get out, and you'll have to let us out, I screamed at him. The devil sat and thought, his hand to his chin. After a moment, he looked back down at me.
New game, huh? I agree to your terms. You both remember and both have to make it through the gate, but I will make it much harder.
Deal, I spat. The devil grinned and lifted his hand.
Then, please do better next time, will you?
And this time, we awoke somewhere. Somewhere completely different.
This concludes our story. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.